Audiobook by Fate's Reader. Don't forget to subscribe and like the channel for more epic series. Drop your recommended novel below. We love to know what you want to hear next. Tales of Hurting Gods. Chapter 531, One Calamity Sword. Just this sword skill alone still isn't enough for me to defeat First Ancestor Human Emperor. Qin Mu put away his sword and looked at Supreme Emperor Heaven that was shrouded in darkness. When he did that, the astonishing sword light in the sky vanished. On the battlefield, crackling flames were still blazing, yet to be extinguished. The smell of burning flesh was everywhere. Qin Mu had vented all of his emotions and feelings in that sword earlier and reached a height that he had never achieved before. However, there was still quite a large difference between First Ancestor Human Emperor and him. Yet without First Ancestor Human Emperor's pressure and without the encounter in the Dark Realm, it would have been very hard for him to take that step, to walk out a village chief's sword picture of butcher's knife skills. When he had stabbed with that sword, it hadn't been just him founding a sword skill that belonged to him. He had also attacked the dark clouds that had been clouding his heart lately. Xianxia looked at his back. The youth's sword training on the sacrificial altar left a deep impression on her. It was especially so for his last move, when he had tapped the heart of his brows and stabbed with a sword. The mood hidden inside it had unleashed on a great scale. Suddenly, she could almost see a world changing due to a reform, countless ambitious people fighting in foul wind and bloody rain, rushing forward after someone. In the sword skills that Qin Mu had executed earlier, their intricacy had dispersed the spirit. Even though sword treading mountains and rivers was imposing and had the spirit of a heavenly god advancing courageously, it was only describing the mountains and rivers. Sword of founding Emperor Sea of Blood was overflowing with murderous intent and was overbearing, having the aptitude of the sword god. But the sword will was commemorating the martyrs, still obsessed with the past. Calamity of High Emperor was full of sorrowful, describing the death of High Emperor era. These three sword skills had their pros, but they also had their cons. In terms of spirit, Xianxia felt that they were all inferior to Qin Mu's last move. As to which were better in battle, she couldn't say clearly. Superb sword skill. She stood up and came to Qin Mu's side. What sword skill was that? Calamity sword. Qin Mu turned his head and saw her walking over. She then raised her head to look into the distance. Suddenly, a gale swept in their faces and transformed into an incomparably handsome tiger. It had yellow and black stripes, which were swirling with the movement of the fur and looking extraordinarily impressive. Small tufts of soft fur grew on his ears as well, able to rotate in all directions. Superb sword skill. That sword skill was indeed impressive. The tiger god walked up the stone steps of the sacrificial altar. When he was halfway up, his feet left the ground and he transformed into a tiger-headed god which walked up to Qin Mu. His voice boomed when he spoke. Why is it called Calamity Sword? The tiger god was Saint Woodcutter's mount who had been summoned to this world along its lord. He had carried Saint Woodcutter into battle and was very brave. Qin Mu's heart moved slightly. The black tiger god returning from the front lines meant that its lord had quelled the devil gods in the front lines. The change of heaven and earth means a great calamity. Heaven and earth may change not only because of natural disasters, invasion of heavenly devils, nor people dying to fire and floods. The change of heaven and earth is also a change in thinking of the people and a reform of divine arts, turning skills into great Tao. The tiger god turned to him and sneered as he walked up. Changing the people's hearts, divine arts, laws, paths, what a haughty tone. Just your sword skill alone. Can it change this world, change this universe, change the thinking of every living being? Your sword skill isn't bad, but your heart is too ambitious. Qin Mu's gaze became fervent, and his tone filled with excitement. If people's hearts change, they won't fear gods anymore, and when people won't fear gods, the gods will have no power. When this happens, divine arts will be free to be changed. With that, laws will change and so will the paths. Just like that, the heaven and earth will change too. Xianxia looked at the youth beside her who was full of spirit. Even when facing the black tiger god with extraordinary aura, he wasn't fearful in the least. Qin Mu raised his hand and pointed at the miserable battlefield in the darkness. His voice was slightly hoarse, but it was also heart-gripping in the night. Look, this is the calamity gods and devils have thrown on us. For the people to keep the gods and devils in awe, to fear and respect, worship them. My calamity sword then shall open the calamity of changing people's heart, one of changing divine arts and paths. From there, I'll change the world. He became more and more passionate. Even though Xianxia couldn't understand what he was saying, she could sense the passion burning in his heart. The youth seemed to have an infectious charm that could make people listen to him, unable to resist getting influenced by his emotions. That black tiger god came to the bottom of the sacrificial altar in a few steps. His body far surpassed that of Qin Mu and the rest, and so put extremely strong pressure on them. This tiger god looked down at Qin Mu before smiling as his whiskers spread apart. I knew you were remarkable. I don't understand all you've said, but I felt that they were powerful words. What's the name of this move of yours? Qin Mu raised his head to look up at him and said solemnly, This sword skill is called Opening Calamity. The black tiger god was slightly stunned. Opening the calamity for the change in people's heart? For the change in divine arts? For the change in paths? Great name. Xianxia also understood some of it. The youth beside her that had come from a different world was going to send a calamity to the gods and devils that were making their lives miserable, and so the skill was called Opening Calamity. It walked the route of reform, improving the ways of the past and changing the lives of gods and devils. How many moves does your calamity sword have? The black tiger god asked. Qin Mu blushed and muttered, So far only one move. I feel that I've already used up all my knowledge just to create this move. That should be about right. You couldn't have accumulated much at your age. The whiskers of the black tiger god stuck to his face. At your age, to be able to found a sword skill is already pretty remarkable. I'm under the orders of my lord to fetch you. He is coming to blows with someone and needs you. Follow me. Qin Mu was slightly stunned, but he couldn't help growing excited. Saint Woodcutter wants to see me? The black tiger god returned to his true form and said, Didn't you hear clearly? He was fighting with someone when he suddenly thought of you, so he wants you to go over. Come on to my back. There are still dangers on the path with the devils running around, so you couldn't reach the place by yourself. Saint Woodcutter is fighting with someone. Bah! If he is fighting, why does he need me there? Qin Mu was puzzled, but he still jumped onto his back. Xianxia hurriedly jumped up as well while saying, My father is also on the front lines. I want to look for him. The gorgeous tiger god in black and yellow sprinted to the front lines. His speed was extremely fast. Even though his body was huge, he was covered with lean muscles and was completely silent when he ran. There was no sound at all. Much faster than Fatty Dragon. Qin Mu gripped his fists tightly and suddenly felt his heart aching. Even though the dragon Qilin was much faster than before, his steps were still heavy and would even shatter mountain rocks when he ran at full speed. Xianxia looked at the pitch-black night, slightly worried. They had left the battlefield and leaped across the front lines. They were heading for Li City, in which the devils had their camp. Many devil gods gathered there, and among them was also true devil Fu Riluo. Back when Li City had been invaded, it was Fu Riluo who had attacked personally. He executed his devil technique and massacred countless people in the city. Even 2 true gods of Supreme Emperor Heaven were killed by him. He was truly fearsome. The black tiger god leaped across the army and went straight for the city. With such actions, wasn't he just seeking death? How do the divine arts practitioners of Supreme Emperor Heaven determine if a person has the aptitude of a true god? Qin Mu asked a girl beside him after remembering it. How do you guys cultivate? Xianxia suppressed the unease in her heart and said, First, we look at the aptitude. Spirit bodies that have the aptitudes of kings won't have bad aptitudes. If they get a famed teacher, their corporeal bodies can reach the extent of a young true god. Other than that, our Supreme Emperor Heaven also has a test that is called God Suppression Pagoda. Those who are able to walk out of the pagoda will be recognized as those who have the aptitude of a true god. Qin Mu blinked at her. God Suppression Pagoda? What is it?
Before Xianxia could answer, the Black Tiger God's voice reached them. God Suppression Pagoda is a treasure from founding emperor era and is used to test the attainments of a corporeal body. If a person one can pass, it doesn't really mean that they have the aptitude of a true god, just that their corporeal body barely reaches the extent of a young true god. Among those who have passed God Suppression Pagoda in Supreme Emperor Heaven, at most half have the aptitude of a true god. Being a true god is beyond difficult, so where's the logic in anyone becoming a true god just by cultivating the techniques of true god diligently? Xianxia also couldn't help becoming curious. Senior, in that case, what is considered to have the aptitude of a true god? The true aptitude does not only lie in the corporeal body, but also in the primordial spirit which is split in spirit and soul. Has your spirit embryo reached the aptitude of a true god? Has your soul reached the aptitude of a true god? Other than primordial spirit, there's still the frame of mind. But even if reaches the god realm, it still isn't enough to become a true god, because other those things, there's also divine arts and paths, the Black Tiger God explained. The divine arts practitioners who you guys see as having the aptitude of a true god are still a long way from becoming such. For example, youth, what is your name? My name is Qin Mu. He then hurriedly added, the current Heavenly Saint Cult Master. Heavenly Saint Cult Master? Never heard before. Qin Mu's expression became black. Ever since Heavenly Devil Cult was founded, everyone had viewed Saint Woodcutter and the Patriarch and the Sacred Teachers. Never would they have expected for his mount to not have even heard of them. The Black Tiger then continued with his speech. For example, Qin Mu, his abilities aren't weak, but in your eyes, his corporeal body has not reached the aptitude of a true god. Yet with his strong abilities, he's able to fight against those so-called divine arts practitioners with the aptitude of a true god. That's because I'm the Overlord body. Qin Mu said with excitement. Overlord body? Never heard before. The Black Tiger God sprinted through the night while speaking. Your sword skill is almost close to the realm of path, so your comprehension of paths, skills, and divine arts is almost at the aptitude of a true god. Your frame of mind is slightly weaker, though, and not strong enough. As for the primordial spirit, it's very powerful and can be considered first class among the divine arts practitioners of the current generation. That's why he has the strength to fight against young experts with the aptitude of a true god. We're at Li City. In front of them, flames rushed into the sky. A magnificent city was shrouded in the light. On top of it, devil gods and countless devils stood. Xianxia looked at this sight in fear. Yet the devil gods and devils didn't stop the Black Tiger God, letting them into the city without a word.
Tales of Hurting Gods. Chapter 532, Forging just before the battle. Xianxia was extremely nervous. The Black Tiger God had brought them into the enemy's nest. So could he have turned sides? However, he is a god. There would have been no need to lie to us. If he wanted to kill us, he could have just taken us down or eaten us. Even though logic said that, she still felt nervous in her heart. After all, they were in the enemy's camp. The devil race had existed in Supreme Emperor Heaven for some 20,000 years, and in her memory, they were all fiendish and utterly evil. If anyone landed in their hands, it would be fortunate for them to find death. And now they were in their camp. She looked around and saw countless devils staring at them. The heavenly devils sent chills down her back. They looked like hungry beasts hiding in the darkness, ready to pounce and tear them into pieces. Xianxia's palms were covered in cold sweat. Her gaze landed on one devil god, and she couldn't shift it away. That man was topless, but his face didn't look like that of a normal human. There were only groups of flame markings that covered his whole body. His eyes were extremely strange, flickering in his eye sockets like two balls of fire. When he saw them, he smiled. Young lady, I've seen you before. Your family has died under my hands, right? Xianxia's hands formed into tight fists, but she didn't say anything. Qin Mu took a look at that devil god, and his pupils contracted. He remembered that the first time he met Xianxia, heavenly devils had attacked that city, and Xianxia's father had gone to defend when he was encircled. A devil god had then pushed his way toward Xianghua's family and killed most of the people. Back then, the sight had been terrifying. Even though he couldn't see Xianghua's face, he could feel her fear and anger. Qin Mu had run everywhere with her, and only then did she survive unscathed. Back then, Qin Mu and Xianghua had been in two different worlds, so he couldn't see the face of that devil god clearly, but judging from Xianghua's current expression, he could confirm that this topless devil god was the one that had massacred her family. The style of construction here is quite similar to that of our great ruins. I've seen numerous ruins of founding emperor era, and they are similar to the palaces here. Qin Mu suddenly smiled. Sister Xianghua, your supreme emperor heaven might just be related to our great ruins. He wanted to divert her attention, but she was plagued with matters of the heart and couldn't pay him much attention. The black tiger god answered instead. Supreme Emperor Heaven belonged to Founding Emperor. It was part of the first heaven of the 33 heavens, so it's not strange that the buildings look similar. Supreme Emperor Heaven is from Founding Emperor era? Qin Mu's heart trembled violently, and he cried out, "What kind of place is 33 heavens? Hasn't Founding Emperor era ended?" The black tiger god was bewildered. Founding Emperor era has ended? When did that happen? How could it have ended when Founding Emperor is still alive? As long as Founding Emperor is still alive, Founding Emperor era will never end. Qin Mu was flustered, and his heart pounded crazily. Founding Emperor era had yet to end. This news was too shocking. He immediately thought of his encounters in Great Ruins and Fengdu, how the Heavenly King's God statue had acted on Founding Emperor's orders and rode the Dragon Qilin to kill the Dragon King, and how King Yama of Fengdu had mentioned Founding Emperor going to Carefree Village. These two matters were clear signs that Founding Emperor era had not yet ended. However, when the Black Tiger God said this personally, it still gave Qin Mu a great shock. Your frame of mind is unstable, so it will be bad for your fight later. The Black Tiger God was stern, and his voice loud. Your attainments in frame of mind aren't great to begin with, so won't you at least stabilize your mind? Qin Mu was muddle-headed. He asked in puzzlement, "What fight? We're here." The Black Tiger God suddenly stopped, and his body trembled, pushing Qin Mu and Xianghua off. When the two of them landed on the ground, the Black Tiger God shook and transformed back into a tiger-headed god. He looked down and frowned at the two people. He then said loudly, "Mu Lord, these two people are useless. Their minds are all flustered. They will probably lose miserably if you send them to fight." Xianghua had seen the devil god that had almost wiped out her whole family, and her mind was agitated, making it hard for her to restrain herself. Qin Mu's mind was also shaken, but his by the information the Black Tiger God had told him. He was still in a daze, so neither of them was in a good state now. However, after hearing the Black Tiger God's words, the two of them came back to their senses and looked ahead of themselves. The sight astonished them. The palaces up ahead, laid out in a picturesque disorder, were extremely strange. Some of them were bathed in fire, but not destroyed. The flames seemed to be emanated by the palaces themselves, even though it left them almost transparent from the scorching heat. The youths could see the interior of the palaces from the outside. The flames lighted up the whole city like it was daytime. In the sky above the palaces, gods and devils were facing each other, and Qin Mu immediately saw Saint Woodcutter. He also saw numerous gods standing behind him. Among them was Xianghua's father. Opposite them was a devil god that did not look like a devil, but was even somewhat refined and graceful. The only problem was that he didn't have ears. In the place of his left ear there was a face, and it was the same where his right ear was supposed to be. Qin Mu couldn't see his back, so he didn't know if there was a face on the back of his head too. Suddenly, a black pillar rose that was several yards thick. It was like a black pagoda that stabbed diagonally the vast courtyard. An unbelievably huge axe was also sent into the plaza. That axe was almost as thick as the black pillar. Only now did Qin Mu notice that it wasn't a black pillar, nor was it a black pagoda, but a huge spear. It crossed with Saint Woodcutter's axe and stood upright in the plaza. The two spirit weapons were too large, and cracks formed on the ground from the pressure. "Enter the plaza." The Black Tiger God hurried them. Once the people in front die, it will be your turn. Qin Mu and Xianxia walked forward to the borders of the plaza. There were several divine arts practitioners inside, all covered in blood. They were all adjusting their breaths while standing with armor. They should have come from the battlefield. On the other side, there were also other young divine arts practitioners, but they were devils. They should have also come from the battlefield since a few had injuries. They all looked fierce and brave. My lord, they are here. The black tiger god bowed to Saint Woodcutter in the sky above. Why are their minds not peaceful? The black tiger god immediately answered. The cultivation of his frame of mind is simply too weak. When he heard it was still founding emperor era now, his soul wandered off. Saint Woodcutter gave him a stare, and the two long ears moved back and stuck to the back of the tiger god's head. He became submissive and didn't dare to talk. Saint Woodcutter looked at Qin Mu, who was flipped through his Taotai sack before taking out a chunk of black iron. He then poked at the fire emanating from the palace. Mind not at ease and a bouncy temper. I wonder if he's useful? Could I have been wrong in my judgment? He clearly wasn't that curious and lively in the battlefield. The black iron in Qin Mu's hand was immediately affected by the heat and got scorching to the touch. Qin Mu threw it down without any hesitation. The flames on the chunk of black iron had yet to extinguish when it became a pile of molten iron. It kept burning though, and in not even a breath's time, it changed into ashes. No wonder this place is called Li City. This is actually Li Fire. Saint Woodcutter frowned slightly while a junior behind him cried out in astonishment, breaking the silence. Not only is there Li Fire, but there's even Devil Fire, Qin Mu stated. The black tiger god couldn't help explaining. This place was conquered by the devils and their fire is hidden inside Li Fire, which is their scheme. Don't touch it and be careful of burning yourself to death. That's right. How did you know there's devil fire in Li Fire? Li Fire has high heat and is good for forging since it can easily melt black iron, but it won't burn it cleanly, Qin Mu explained. Devil fire has a very terrifying corrosive characteristic, but its temperature isn't high. What melted black iron was Li Fire, while what burned it cleanly away was devil fire. Suddenly, his eyes shined, and the black tiger god jumped in shock. Devil fire can be used to smelt spirit weapons, while Li Fire is an even better divine fire. This trip is great. My sword pellet can be improved even more. Qin Mu cried out in excitement. Mute had taught him the marvel of smelting, and he knew the use of every kind of fire. Now that he could see two of them, he couldn't help becoming excited. He immediately took out an iron board and a frame before taking out a black iron hammer. Brother Tiger, you don't know it, but my sword pellet has already been cultivated to the flexibility of wrapping around a finger. Another step forward would be like flowing water. All this time, I couldn't find any high-quality flames, but now, I finally found some. Qin Mu took out his sword pellet and looked at the dumbfounded black tiger god. He said with a smile, Devil fire can burn away black iron, but it can't burn black gold essence. My swords are made out of black gold essence with divine metal mixed into it. By smelting them with the devil fire, I can remove the impurities. The gods and devils in the surroundings were stunned. They saw Qin Mu quickly constructing a smelting table before taking out a black felt apron to tie around his waist. He threw the flying swords onto the smelting table, then picked one to stuff into the flames. Clang! The sound of beating metal dispersed the solemn atmosphere. Qin Mu hammered each and every one of his spirit weapons seriously. Every strike of his was fully focused. The one who threshes grains. Xianxia called out softly. How do you know how to forge treasures too? Qin Mu didn't raise his head when he said humbly, I've learned it for over 10 years, so I'm slightly better at it than algebra. Xianxia stuck out her tongue and looked at him forging. Her heart suddenly calmed down from its flustered state. When her father had seen her having come as well, he frowned slightly and opened his mouth. However, he resisted speaking. Clang, clang, clang. Qin Mu forged continuously. Even though there were over a dozen gods and devils around, the only sound was that of him beating metal, and it was irritating everyone. Suddenly, The devil god opposite of Saint Woodcutter turned his head to face him with another face. He said pleasantly, "Fu Riluo has finally met the heavenly master of the fake celestial heavens from back then. It's true that your reputation can't be compared to meeting you in person. This successor of yours is truly interesting, but are you sure you want him to fight for you?" Saint Woodcutter had an indifferent expression. Cultivating a heart is like forging ironware. His heart was uneasy earlier, so he's merely using forging to calm his flustered emotions for his inner heart to calm down. This is a kind of profound cultivation method for the frame of mind, Fu Riluo. Can't you see that? Clang, clang, clang. Qin Mu swung his huge hammer up and smacked the blades nonstop. He didn't look like he was cultivating his heart at all. Instead, he looked like he was really forging ironware. The corners of Saint Woodcutter's eyes twitched, and he almost couldn't put up a straight face anymore. Why is he still beating them? Below, Qin Mu put away the swords that were done and took out another huge batch to be calcined in the fire. Veins popped out on Saint Woodcutter's forehead, but they were forced down by him straight away. Fu Riluo laughed loudly. "It's hard for you to get rid of me, and I also can't get rid of you. In that case, let these juniors fight for us. Heavenly Master, if my side wins, you shall scram back and continue envisioning your beautiful dream. If your side wins, I'll leave Li City to you." Saint Woodcutter hesitated for a moment, and the clanging reached his ears once more. Qin Mu was still beating the iron seriously. Nearby, Brilliant's injured city lord said in a low voice, "Heavenly Master, don't worry. My Supreme Emperor Heaven also has young talents. They are all youths with the aptitude of a true god, and they won't be any weaker than Fu Riluo's disciple." Saint Woodcutter looked at Qin Mu was still beating the iron, and he could only nod. Tales of Hurting Gods. Chapter 533 Knife God. Saint Woodcutter looked at the opposite side where a few devil gods had brought their proud students. Those young devil experts were all overflowing with fierce auras. Every one of them had terrifying corporeal bodies and were extremely strong. They were obviously experts that had been through life and death. He'd fought with the devils before and deeply knew the strength of this race. Purely based on corporeal body, even if the divine arts practitioners of Supreme Emperor Heaven had the aptitude of a true god, they would still be slightly inferior. On top of that, because there were many battles in Supreme Emperor Heaven, they frequently had to fight with the devils, so it was difficult for them to form schools and academies like Eternal Peace did. They also couldn't form large-scale sects, so it was usually gods finding outstanding talents to personally teach them. There were advantages and disadvantages to doing so. The advantages were that with the personal teachings of the gods and devils, every one of them was elites with extremely powerful abilities. There were no flaws in the inheritance of paths, skills, and divine arts in Supreme Emperor Heaven. Even god-level techniques could be passed down. For example, Xianxia. She was personally taught by her father Sang Yi. The disadvantage was that one person could only learn what their master had to teach, and that's it. They found it very difficult to learn other people's ultimate arts. For example, Xianxia cultivated Sang Ye's technique and divine arts, so she had never learned a divine art that he did not possess. Even if she learned it, the other party wouldn't be able to teach her as diligently as Sang Yi. Without learning the techniques and divine arts of others, one could only be skilled in a specialized area. But this resulted in the paths, skills, and divine arts of Supreme Emperor Heaven not showing any improvement. They were much inferior to those of Eternal Peace. Qin Mu was able to see that, which meant that Saint Woodcutter could naturally see it too. He looked at the youth who was still forging and couldn't help doubting himself. When I saw him in danger in the battlefield, I executed a divine art that he could comprehend, and he learned it immediately, escaping successfully. By right, this successor of mine should have unmatched talent and have cultivated the technique I had passed down to the degree of perfection, which was why he was able to comprehend my divine art in an instant. Yet why has he become so unreliable now? Could my judgment have really been wrong? At that moment, a god walked over and bowed. "Heavenly Master, the 7 Stars Realms experts of Supreme Emperor Heaven are here." Saint Woodcutter looked at them and nodded gently. "Let them come in." Xianxia looked around, and her eyes suddenly lit up. The one who threshes grains, that girl is called Yu. She's the #1 divine arts practitioner of 7 Stars Realm. Qin Mu pulled out a sword from the firewall and examined it. The heat still wasn't there yet, so he stuffed it back in. Xianxia was beyond excited. She said to Qin Mu, Yu He is the disciple of true God Pang Yu and has passed through the test of God Suppression Pagoda. She has slain 3 devil experts at the level of a young true devil and is acclaimed as the #1 in 7 Stars Realm. That's her. The girl who bunned up her hair so high that it looks like a small pagoda. She's very pretty. The black tiger god looked over at the girl called Yu who had a cold expression. She removed her earrings, bracelets, and tidied her clothes. It was evident that she was ready for a life and death struggle. She's indeed not bad, an expert, the black tiger god praised. She removed the extra accessories from her body for her movements to be unrestricted. She can be said to have been forged in hundreds of battles. The one who threshes grains, look, the top 10 divine arts practitioners of 7 Stars Realm are all here. Wait, that's not right, there are 2 people missing. Could they have died in battle? Qin Mu focused on his forging and shook to transform into the true form of Mercury Sovereign. He drew cold water vapor to cool down the sword. He then grabbed the flying sword and poured his vital chi in. Rubbing his hands, he turned the shiny sword into a pellet. He then nodded in satisfaction. Xianxia was ineffably excited. Look, that's Shu Yao. His master is true god Yan Shuo. But he, unfortunately, died in the last fight with Fu Riluo. However, Shu Yao is indeed abnormally powerful. He has the manner of a master and his technique is overbearing while his divine arts are fierce. What he walks is the route of the corporeal body becoming that of a saint. The black tiger god looked at Shu Yao and saw that this youth had a calm bearing that wouldn't be alarmed even if the heaven fell. Even when faced with so many gods and devils, he didn't have a change in expression. He's much steadier than the one who threshes grains that looked around in wonder all the time. This Shu Yao is also an expert, the black tiger god praised. Shu Yao walked over. He was an extremely earnest youth, and his bearing was extraordinary calm. The few people beside him were also extremely unordinary. Every one of them, no matter if it was a boy or girl, they all had thick murderous aura surrounding them. All of them should have just come from the battlefield. Xianxia was excited to the highest level. These people that could walk out of God Suppression Pagoda are all young experts, and each of them is legendary. That's Huang Yu over there. He has been through numerous big battles and is known for his outstanding military service. He's also the disciple of true God Pang Yu and was the fastest to pass through God Suppression Pagoda. It's just that his ranking is a little low, at rank 3. Qin Mu put away all the flying swords he had finished refining while stuffing all the others into Li Fire to continue working non-stop. The black tiger god looked at Huang Yu who was obviously a martial maniac. Even under such a situation, he was still cultivating. He didn't forget to execute his technique even when he was walking, and clouds floated above his head. His technique was very strange, and he had already cultivated his primordial spirit. Even though he couldn't project it yet, he could already have it breathe vital chi in and out. The clouds above his head were visions formed from his primordial spirit condensing his vital chi. The cultivation of this man is extremely dense. The eyes of the black tiger god lit up, and he praised, another martial maniac, but his thoughts are very pure. He doesn't have any other thoughts besides growing stronger, so his frame of mind is naturally great. The one who threshes grains and long braid girl, you too should learn from him. Xianxia knew that he was giving her pointers and hurriedly nodded. The black tiger god looked at Qin Mu who took out another bunch of flying swords to stab them into the fire. He smacked another one with his hammer to refine away the impurities within it. The black tiger god's complexion turned black. Yuhi looked over and her gaze landed on Qin Mu who was busy forging his swords. She frowned slightly and asked Xianxia, Junior sister Xianxia, this person is? Xianxia looked at her in admiration and replied with a smile. This is Qin Mu. He's from another world. His Qin is the Qin from threshing grains. Senior sister, you've become world famous in the battle in Shur City. Yuhi's expression fell. However, Sure City still fell into the enemy's hands. The devil's abilities are indeed slightly stronger than ours. However, the divine arts practitioners of my supreme Emperor Heaven are no weaker than the devils who are just relying on their numbers. Xu Yao walked over and gave Sanghua a gentle smile. Sister Sanghua, you haven't entered God Suppression Pagoda yet, right? I see your abilities are also extraordinary and have improved a lot since we last met. You will definitely be able to pass the test of God Suppression Pagoda. Sanghua's chest brimmed with pride. Xu Yao looked at Qin Mu and slightly frowned. He asked in a low voice, "This is Qin Mu who threshes the grains." Yuhi felt helpless. He's from another world and his temper is a little weird. He came all the way here to forge. Sanghua blushed and said in a low voice, "Qin Mu is very powerful. He has a gate that I've never seen before. Wherever it passes, nothing will live. He killed many experts of the devil race. He also has a moonjade eyes that killed Fu Yuxiao in one shot. His attainments in algebra are extremely high, but his medical expertise is even higher. His forging is also better than his algebra. Fu Riluo's disciple Fu Yuxiao was killed by him? Everyone was astonished and they all looked at Qin Mu only to see him still forging. Yuhi said with a calm expression, "The treasures of this senior brother Qin are truly extraordinary." The others all nodded. Fu Yuxiao was famous among the younger generation as an expert of celestial being realm. For Qin Mu to be able to kill Fu Yuxiao, it had to have been due to the power of that so-called moonjade eye. It isn't entirely the credit of the treasure, since it was accomplished only because of the one who threshes grains' very high attainments in algebra. He said he had relied on algebra to calculate the next step of Fu Yuxiao to be able to shoot him. While saying that, Sanghua became less and less confident. Algebra? Everyone shook their heads, and Huang Yu said indifferently, "What use is algebra? Not only will it not increase one's battle power, but it will also take up the time from cultivation."
The black tiger god gave a cough and said solemnly, "Everyone, go and calm down your minds first. There will be fierce battles later. My lord has already fought with Fu Riluo numerous times just now, but the outcome was hard to determine, so a new idea was brought up. The younger generation shall fight to determine the ownership of Li City. We'll need to use everyone's abilities if we'll want to take back Li City." Xiao looked at Qin Mu who was still forging and said with a frown, "How can we calm our minds with this senior brother forging over here?" The others all nodded. The black tiger god looked at them helplessly. "Please pardon him. His frame of mind isn't like yours, so he needs to rely on forging to stabilize it." Suddenly, Huang Yu's gaze fell with intensity on the other side, and his voice grew slightly hoarse. "Zhehuali, Fu Riluo's proudest disciple. I've met him on the battlefield, and in the darkness, I almost died in his hands. Luckily, reinforcements came on time." Xiao also stared at that young devil expert. The knife on his back trembled, giving off knife cries. The young expert then said in a low voice, "I've also exchanged blows with him and lost. Maybe only senior sister Yuhi can defeat him." Yuhi's gaze landed on Zhehuali and she shook her head. "I encountered him in the battlefield just now. Even though we were broken up by the battle formation after 2 moves, it was enough for me to determine his abilities. I'm not 100% confident in defeating him. You guys must be careful when fighting him." The black tiger god looked at the young expert of the devil race and was slightly stunned. Up ahead was a cultured and refined youth. Based on his appearance, one couldn't see that he was a devil at all. That's not right. He isn't a devil, but a human. The black tiger god's heart trembled slightly, and he instantly realized Zhehuali's background. He said in a low voice, "He's not only the disciple of Fu Riluo, but someone from the upper bound." Yuhi, Xu Yao, and Huang Yu were all astonished. They wanted to ask for details, but the black tiger god leaped into the sky. He said to Saint Woodcutter, "My lord, something is wrong with the origin of that Zhehuali. He's not a devil, so he should have come from the upper bound." Saint Woodcutter nodded and looked at the other side. He said solemnly, "Fu Riluo, it seems you are also related to the so-called celestial heavens. This disciple of yours is from the upper bound. I wonder which high god is he the disciple of? Fu Riluo laughed loudly and said leisurely, Zhehuali has a stable foundation and his devil technique is right behind mine. His abilities are outstanding, and he is the disciple that I think the most highly of. However, your guess isn't wrong, and his background is great. He has another master, and you also know him. This person is the knife god who calls himself Wushuang. You've exchanged blows before. Saint Woodcutter's expression sunk, and he nodded. Divine Knife Luo Wushang, the top general of Spirit Elite Guards. He's indeed an old friend. Never would I have thought that you would actually become related to him. The ears of Qin Mu, who had been forging, suddenly twitched, and he placed the iron hammer in his hand. He raised his head and asked Sang Hua, what guards? What Wushuang? Spirit Elite Guards, Luo Wushuang. You, he said indifferently, my master true god Peng Yu had mentioned him. Luo Wushuang is a broken arm knife god of the ancient times, a true god with very powerful knife skills. He only has one arm, but his knife skills have reached perfection. Qin Mu was stunned. He suddenly recalled the night 40,000 years ago and the Luo Wushuang of the Spirit Elite Guards that he had encountered. That night, he had stood on the chest to cover for the escape and cut off one of Luo Wushuang's arm. Could the two Luo Wushuangs be the same person? Qin Mu hurriedly looked at Zhehuali, and Shi Yao smiled as he inquired, Senior brother Qin who threshes the grains, why aren't you forging anymore? Qin Mu didn't answer, and Zhehuali on the opposite side immediately felt his gaze. He raised his head, and their eyes met. Qin Mu's gaze landed on Zhehuali's back where he saw a long knife that was very demonic and evil. There was an eye on its hilt. That eye suddenly opened and stared at Qin Mu. Zhehuali saw Qin Mu's face and was slightly stunned. His expression filled with disbelief, and he took out a scroll from his chest. He examined it and took another look at Qin Mu before suddenly smiling in delight. Qin Mu's gaze was fixated on that demon knife when he said solemnly, Sister Sang Hua, if I tell you that the arm of divine knife Luo Wushuang had been cut off by me, will you believe me?
Tales of Hurting Gods. Chapter 534, Hard Rock. Divine Knife Luo Wushuang's arm was cut off by you? Everyone in the surroundings found it extremely preposterous. Even the most stable Shu Yao couldn't help bursting into laughter. Senior brother Qin who threshes the grains. Just focus your mind on forging. Qin Mu looked away, but his expression became strangely serious. Suddenly Yu He, Huang Yu, Shu Yao, Sang Hua, and the rest moved a step away from Qin Mu, bewildered. For that instant, they felt that this youth forging beside them had suddenly become a sword that was about to be unsheathed. Light rays had been about to burst forth in all directions. His acute spirit was threatening, but it was left in the sword sheath without being drawn. The youth had moved because of natural instinct, avoiding a terrifying fighting spirit and murderous intent. Clang, clang. The sound of metal being beaten rang out as Qin Mu went back to the smelting table, focusing on hammering his flying swords. Everyone couldn't help doubting that if it was their senses that had went wild for a moment. Meanwhile, on the other side, a female devil beside Zhehuali took a glance and said in astonishment, The person in your painting looks like that brat forging on the other side. Zhehuali rolled up the painting and put it away. He said indifferently, My master has been looking for him for a long time. He said that the reason his knife skills reached such a level was all thanks to him. Old man executed his sword skill for me to see before I left for the lower bound and gave this painting to me. He wanted me to find that person and execute his knife skills to show him. The female devil couldn't help shuddering as she chuckled. Your master seems to be quite concerned about him. His order for you is to make this forging brat see how powerful his knife skills are. I can feel the hatred in your master's heart, but there should also be a hint of respect. However, that forging brat is only a youth, so how could he have caught the attention of your master? This I do not know. Zhehuali's gaze landed on Qin Mu. Just a few months ago, master even crossed realms to contact me, saying that the person he wanted to find has appeared. He asked me to take a trip to that world to look for him. However, with the incoming big battle, I didn't have the time to go that world. Never did I expect to encounter him here. He let out a shaky breath and added in a low voice, "For the knife god to view him so highly, I'd like to meet him very much." Qin Mu, who was forging, revealed no emotions and just continued to forge his flying swords without a care. However, Zhehuali could still sense that his gaze was making this youth uncomfortable. When his gaze landed on Qin Mu's body, he could clearly see the youth adjusting his posture. Zhehuali's smile, unable to quell his excitement. The eye on the demon knife also became excited and rotated a few rounds, increasing in size and becoming bloody. Suddenly, Fu Riluo's voice rang out. "Heavenly Master, since everyone is already here, let us begin. Should we set any rules? Rules? Where are the rules in a life and death struggle?" Fu Riluo laughed loudly, and in the courtyard, the black spear trembled. The plaza cracked, and explosions came from the ground as ravines spread out in all directions. The footing of Qin Mu and the rest instantly became unstable. They hurriedly roused their vital qi. Saint Woodcutter raised his eyebrows, and the huge axe also shook to fight with the devil's spear. The collision of the two divine weapons suddenly tore the space in the center of the plaza and stretched it. Among the world-shaking explosions, the expressions of Qin Mu and the rest changed drastically. The land under their feet suddenly rose high up. They couldn't even stand with two legs if they wanted to keep them, but had to jump on only one because of the expanding land. The terrain of the plaza under their feet had changed. In an instant, mountains had been raised, and the distance between them was still rapidly growing greater. The power of the two divine weapons collided and actually stretched the plaza as though there was a boundless power creating mountains from nothing at all. Ravines crossed each other and mountains rose and stretched into the distance. This kind of magnificent power made the youths look up in awe. Qin Mu looked at the transformations in front of him in astonishment. The flat plaza was like the blue sea turning into mulberry fields. It was undergoing transformations that could only happen after hundreds of thousands or even millions of years in just a short while. This was the mighty force of gods and devils, the power that mortals couldn't achieve. Only now did he see how much power a true god controlled. It was a power that Xing, a god that was pieced together, could never hope of possessing. For Fu Riluo to be able to block Saint Woodcutter, his abilities are indeed extraordinary. Qin Mu's heart shook when he sensed his flying swords. There was a portion of them that had been being calcined in the Li Fire and Devil Fire, and he hadn't summoned them back in time. He immediately called them to himself, and the flying swords rose in the distance. They were over 20 miles from him, but he immediately saw a strange sight. The speed of his flying swords was extremely fast, but the distance between them was gradually increasing. This was obviously due to the gods and devils as they created a world. The speed at which space was expanding surpassed the movement speed of the flying swords. Boom! Suddenly, the space shook violently and the mountains stopped growing. The space stabilized. The flying swords came whooshing over, and Qin Mu raised his hand. The flying swords collided and transformed into a sword pellet which spun in the air. He let out a sigh of relief and looked around. He could no longer see Xianxia and the rest. There was an extreme number of mountains in the surroundings, but they weren't especially high. They were like the mountains in the outside world, but shrunk over 10 times. Qin Mu sliced a chunk of rock and examined it in detail. He then crushed it into powder. Moments later, the rock turned into fine rune markings which gave off their final glow before dispersing with the wind and vanishing completely. They are indeed not real. Qin Mu straightened his back and looked around. The mountains which stretched up and down into the distance should have been materialized by Fu Riluo and Saint Woodcutter using runes. Their abilities didn't seem to have reached the level where they could create real matter. Suddenly, Fu Riluo's voice boomed as though it was thunder from outer space. In battles of life and death, there are no rules. This sand table will be their battlegrounds, and each side will have 10 people in total. The side that comes out victorious will be the winner. How is this suggestion? Qin Mu's heart stirred slightly. Sand table? He raised his head to look toward the source of the voice and saw Fu Riluo and Saint Woodcutter's incomparably huge faces beyond the sky. They looked like planets in outer space. This means that even though the plaza looks countless times larger, it should still be the same from the outside. Qin Mu was endlessly astonished. This kind of thing was simply beyond his imagination. Upon coming, he had already calculated the size of the plaza. It had a palace on each side. They were most likely located in the left yin and the right yang. Qin Mu had walked all the way down the main road, then went up the steps to enter the plaza. It was not even 100 yards in width and had a length of 150 yards. Both sides had steps which led to the palaces beside. If one looked down from the sky, the two palaces and plaza would present the divinatory diagram from Li divinatory trigrams, so Li fire was born. Now, the interior space of the plaza had been expanded numerous times, but to the outside world, it still looked 150 by 100 yards. It was still the divinatory diagram from Li divinatory trigram with the two big palace halls. To Saint Woodcutter, Fu Riluo, Pangyu, and the rest of the gods and devils, Qin Mu was located on a small sand table. All of his movements could be clearly seen like the markings on the palm. Qin Mu narrowed his eyes. Now he had two roads to take. One road was to retreat back to the side of the big palace hall and continue to use Li fire to refine his swords. The other road was to head to the center of the sand table world. That place was where Saint Woodcutter and Fu Riluo's spear were. Instead of searching around, it would be better to go somewhere where everyone knew others would head to. As long as they were smart, they would realize that the first to reach the place where the axe and spear crossed would have the upper hand. That was because being a step earlier would allow them to set up traps and formations while waiting for others to deliver themselves. I refined 316 swords. That's enough for me. Qin Mu moved, swiftly increasing his speed to rush toward the center of the sand table world. Cripple's heaven-pilfering divine legs were executed to their extreme, and he became as fast as flowing light. Boom! His speed surpassed sound, and the wall of air in front of him exploded like a white cloud. Vapor brushed his face as he passed through it. At that moment, Qin Mu heard loud explosions and looked in the direction of the noise. Figures in the distance had also broken through the speed of sound and left behind vapor clouds among the mountains. The circular vapor clouds gradually spread out in an extremely eye-catching manner. There were a total of 19 clouds, and they betrayed 19 experts with incomparably powerful corporeal bodies surpassing the speed of sound at the same time. It was evident that they had all realized that if they were a step earlier than the others in reaching the place where the axe and the spear crossed, they would be at a great advantage and hold the upper hand. Veins popped on Qin Mu's head. Only now did he realize that he was the slowest among the 20 people in the sand table world. Even Sanghua's speed was actually a bit faster than his. The 19 experts were all people who were equivalent to young true gods. The techniques they cultivated allowed their bodies to reach a height that surpassed Qin Mu. Just like that, the speed that Qin Mu was so proud of finally lost to experts on the same realm. Suddenly, Qin Mu stopped and turned to leave. Everyone was heading to where the axe and the spear crossed, so that place would be the most dangerous place instead. Everyone couldn't shake each other off in speed, so the result of running there would be a collision of 20 divine arts practitioners. In the end, it would become a huge and messy brawl. In such a chaotic situation, it was easy for accidents to happen. Even if he possessed better abilities, he could be surrounded and killed. Since it was like that, he might as well not go there. The next moment, the 19 figures that were rushing toward the place where the axe and spear crossed suddenly turned invisible and vanished. He couldn't see where they went. Qin Mu was slightly stunned, and his expression became grim. The ones that have survived for so long in Supreme Emperor Heaven are indeed not stupid and have all thought of the same thing. Interesting, I finally met my match. In that case, I won't look for you guys, but will wait for you to find me. His body suddenly broke through the air and sprinted straight to the borders of the sand table world. Over there was a wall of fire that was dozens of miles high, and the burning palace hall formed the wall between Li fire and the devil fire. After a moment, the sound of iron being beaten came from the sand table world. Could be heard 10 miles away. In no time, Qin Mu saw the first person coming over. It was an alluring girl with a graceful posture. The 10 divine arts practitioners of Supreme Emperor Heaven are all powerful, but you're the weak link. The alluring girl looked at Qin Mu's back and giggled. I don't have the confidence to deal with the other people, so I could only come to take the first credit. Sister. Qin Mu turned his head to give her a radiant smile. You might have stubbed your toe on a hard rock. Tales of Hurting Gods. Chapter 535, Black Like Iron. The waist of the alluring woman was soft as though it was a willow branch in the wind. She swayed left and right as she walked toward Qin Mu and chuckled. How tough could you be? I've seen it just now that your speed is the slowest. Even though it isn't much slower, it showed that your corporeal body's attainments are slightly inferior. But even a slight difference is a world of difference in abilities. Her feet stopped just right before the flying swords that were hidden in a circle around him. The flying swords that Qin Mu had put underground were the first form of sword picture, sword treading mountains and rivers. The girl just needed to step forward, and sword treading mountains and rivers would activate, shredding her apart. She would become a bloody waterfall in the picture of mountains and rivers. However, for her feet to stop just before the trap, she should have noticed that something was wrong. The corner of Qin Mu's eyes twitched, and he praised. How smart. Good sister. What's your name? My name is Taipo Shangyun, and I'm the disciple of true devil Qian Taipo. The woman was bewildered by his actions though. When the people of Supreme Emperor Heaven meet the devils, they always shout at us angrily and never smile. How could you be one of them, calling me good sister the moment you meet me? If all of the people of Supreme Emperor Heaven were like you, I wouldn't have to kill so many divine arts practitioners. I'm actually curious. What is your background? Qin Mu opened his mouth to answer, but Taipo Shangyun stomped her feet that moment. The ground trembled, and flying swords instantly broke into the surface. Qin Mu's face changed slightly, and he raised his hand to grab them. All of the flying swords gathered in his palm and turned into a sword pellet that was about to land in his hand. While he was retrieving his sword, Taipo Shangyun rushed forward at a speed that was no slower than that of his flying swords. Before Qin Mu's sword pellet was even formed, spider legs appeared behind the woman's back and stabbed forward, scattering the sword pellet apart. The woman was incomparably smart, and her spider legs attacked like the storm, breaking the sword pellet to not give Qin Mu any chance. You're truly the weakest one, and I shall claim the first blood. Taipo Shangyun burst into soft laughter as 2 incomparably sharp bone spikes appeared in her hands. She stabbed them toward Qin Mu's chest. Just as she did so, she felt that something was wrong. She saw Qin Mu's smile becoming stiff and falling down into a pool of ink. But he was not the only one to change. Even the leaf fire and the devil fire behind him also turned into ink. Taipo Shangyun hurriedly looked back and saw herself in a frame. Outside it, another Qin Mu was walking calmly toward her. Only then did she realize that she had entered a painting when she was pouncing at him. This is a painting? How could a drawing move and even speak? How did I not see any flaws? Taipo Shangyun was astonished. She leaped up, wanting to jump out of the painting, but she remained trapped inside. Everything was blank besides the ink on the ground that was yet to dry. The woman hissed, and the 8 claws behind her back stabbed ruthlessly toward the outside. Chi, chi, chi. The spider legs pierced through the painting, and Taipo Shangyun was delighted. She wanted to tear apart the painting and jump out. Yet at this moment, Qin Mu blew a mouthful of air, and the painting fluttered away, landing in a wall of fire that was in that direction. In the thickly fire and devil fire, miserable shrieks could be heard as the painting burned into ashes. They formed the shape of a spider lady who was still struggling. In time, she collapsed in the flames and there was no more movement. Sister Shangyun, I would have liked it very much to have a fair fight with you, but there are too many experts and I have to save my stamina for stronger opponents. Qin Mu said apologetically. You are indeed very strong, but you are still not my opponent. Suddenly, the ground under Qin Mu's feet rose up and threw him high up. A giant's footprint appeared in the moving ground, and the moment Qin Mu was kicked up, incomparably sharp stone spikes shot out from the ground toward him. While he was in midair, his sword pellet came flying over and countless flying swords spiraled to shred all the stone spikes. When he was about to locate the enemy's position, the ground exploded once more, and a huge hand formed from magma grabbed at him. Qin Mu punched down. With a loud explosion, a huge volcano rose up and erupted. The power of the punch was instantly increased drastically. The punch and the huge hand collided, and the magma rocks instantly shattered. They flew in random directions and tumbled continuously to gather together once more to form a palm. It closed into a first as devil fire burned in the places between the rocks. The magma giant from Heavenly Devil Horde? When Qin Mu was up, his arm was almost broken. He looked down only to see the ground trembling violently. A Heavenly Devil Horde transformed into the shape of magma to break out of the earth. When this person landed on the ground, he roared loudly, and Qin Mu's body that was in midair was struck by sound waves which had materialized. They pushed him into the wall of fire. Weakly, the magma giant sneered, thinking to leave, but suspicion bloomed in his heart, and he turned his head back. Up ahead, Qin Mu was floating in the wall of fire. However, he had now become a bull-headed mutant with a thick tail. This kind brother, could you finish saying that word before you leave? Qin Mu walked out of the wall of fire. The devil fire and Li fire flowed out from the wall with him and transformed into two fire dragons on which he stepped. Qin Mu's expression was cold. It's not weakly, but weakling. Fire element stars Mars Sovereign? The magma giant looked at him with doubt. Mars Sovereign can control fire, but only God fire. How did you control the devil fire? Do the humans really have such an intricate technique? That's not right, you're using the technique of the devil path. You're also a devil. He got more confused with each revelation. Qin Mu had transformed into a mutant with a bull's head and a human body. The form of Mars Sovereign clearly had a god's body, but devil flames were flowing out from him as he controlled the devil fire. On top of that, there were flowers of flame markings on Qin Mu that looked like fire burning, and one of the two fire dragons under his feet was a devil dragon. Only a devil could control such an intricate divine art. Beyond the sky, Saint Woodcutter and the Black Tiger God saw this sight, and the latter's eyes filled with suspicion. He asked in a low voice, "My lord, do you feel that?" Saint Woodcutter gently nodded. "I can feel it. Appearance is born from the heart while the devil is born from the heart. The devil appearance is born from his face." The Black Tiger God was puzzled. "But I clearly feel something weird is in his body. He seems partly a devil, not purely human." "My lord, you're lying again, right?" Saint Woodcutter frowned slightly and shouted at him, "When have I ever lied?" The Black Tiger God opened his mouth to speak, then shut it when he saw the gods of Supreme Emperor Heaven behind him. "I need to save some face for this old liar." Saint Woodcutter's gaze flickered, repeatedly returning to Qin Mu's body. His thoughts were unknown. He pulled back his gaze and turned to Fu Riluo on the other side. The devil god was also watching Qin Mu, seeming quite interested. Half-devil? His magic power is actually so powerful. A match for Sumo's disciple Shi Quansong. He's using his magic power to supplement what he is lacking in strength and corporeal body. Fu Riluo smiled and said, "Heavenly Master, your successor is an interesting youth, half-devil." Saint Woodcutter was astonished, but he said indifferently, "What devil?" "He is a human who had merely cultivated a technique of the devil path. Who knows them better than me?" Fu Riluo gave a gentle laugh and didn't speak anymore. The magma giant took in a long breath and his body expanded little by little as he rushed toward Qin Mu. "You're still merely a weakling. Your corporeal body has yet to reach the level of a young true god. Even if you've cultivated the forms of the star sovereigns, you will still collapse in one blow." Qin Mu's vital qi was close to violent as the two dragons under his feet sprinted forward. The stars gathered together behind him while shining brightly. They formed a galaxy and each star was connected with the others with a trail of silver light. If one's gaze was clear enough, they would see that there were gods standing upright on each and every one of the stars. The starlight connecting them was the rays giving off by them. They weaved and formed a strange force field. It was the divine art that Li Tianxing had created after comprehending the unity technique of great educational heavenly devil scriptures. Great overarching heavenly stars palm force. In terms of divine arts, Qin Mu had never seen a more intricate one among those who were yet to become gods. The magma giant sneered, and his huge fist came toward Qin Mu. With a loud boom, mountain rocks crumbled and Qin Mu fell. Turning his body around, he rushed over once more. The magma giant roared furiously, and the devil flames on his body burned even fiercely. He suddenly took a step to rush at Qin Mu, and they collided once again. The twin dragons under Qin Mu's feet were squashed into pieces by the repelling force, and he fell back. Rocks flew off in all directions from the magma giant's body, but the next moment, trails of devil fire pulled them back.
That devil fire that flowed through his limbs was like his blood, but also like his tendons. It was very strange. However, at this moment, a sword pellet flew over and merged into his magma body with the rocks. Swoosh! 8,000 swords exploded, slicing through the rocks and the devil fire. In a split second, they flowed through the whole body of the magma giant like river water and severed all his joints. The magma giant was stunned for a moment before collapsing to the ground. Qin Mu also crashed to himself, but he flipped himself up right away. Blood was leaking out from the corner of his lips, but he still rushed over frantically and danced in the sky with 8,000 swords. As he was running, he was also tapping furiously with his sword fingers. On the ground, countless rocks and devil fire were tumbling about to form two thick rock legs. They mixed with the devil fire to flow up and accumulate continuously. The waste was rapidly formed, and the body of the magma giant was about to be reconstructed. His life force was extremely strange. He was one of the few races that could reconstruct their bodies. Sword-treading mountains and rivers. 8,000 swords instantly formed mountains and rivers of light. The moment the magma giant reconstructed himself to the neck, he was swallowed by the mountains and rivers and ended up as countless shattered rocks. Qin Mu sprinted over furiously. With his left hand as Yin and his right hand as Yang, he crossed them as he pressed down on the sword picture formed by sword-treading mountains and rivers. Yin-yang heavenly flipping hands, overlapping hands. The overlapping palm force of Yin and Yang exploded, and the chi of pure Yin and pure Yang merged with the sword picture. Yin lightning and Yang lightning exploded, sending the shattered rocks in all directions. Finally, the last bud of devil fire was extinguished. Qin Mu held onto his knees with both hands and spat out a mouthful of bloody phlegm. He tilted his head and saw another devil expert walking out from the mountain to the side. He then grumbled angrily, "Another one? I've already fought 2 matches, so can't you find another person to fight?" The devil expert walked over with a slight smile. "Who told you to hammer your iron for no reason at all?" Qin Mu's face was black like iron.
Tales of Hurting Gods. Chapter 536, Black Heart Like That of a Devil. You ran the slowest and even in the sky before landing here. Since you revealed your location like that, of course it attracted hunters. The devil expert looked warily at the shattered rocks on the ground, but his expression was quite relaxed. On top of that, you look to be the easiest to bully among the group, so how could I not come? However, your abilities are somewhat out of my expectations. He looked at the shattered rocks on the ground and his pupils slightly contracted. He slowly released his aura bit by bit. You look easy to bully, but your abilities are extremely strong. Even though you don't have the aptitude of a true god, your abilities are already there. You're no weaker than Shu Yao, Huang Yu, and the rest. I really wish I could know how many of your abilities are you still withholding after the battle between you and Shi Kwansong. Is this peach easy for me to pluck? On the ground, flying swords gently floated up and Qin Mu straightened his back while taking in deep breaths. Suddenly, his breathing returned to normal and he smiled. Ever since I've become the heavenly devil cult master, no one has said that I look easy to bully. If you want to pluck this peach, why don't you try it for yourself? He'd been breathless moments ago, but now it was as if there was nothing wrong with him. The devil expert smiled slightly. Shi Chuansong's abilities are extremely powerful. to the point that even I needed to be somewhat wary of them. After a life-and-death fight with him, your injuries can't be light. You suppressed your breathing, but you can't hide your injuries. However, don't worry. If your abilities are strong enough to threaten me, I will turn and leave to find other people. He surveyed the surroundings and said leisurely, "After all, there is still an unknown number of opponents hidden in this forest, so I have to preserve my strength to deal with them, right?" His voice had a devilish ring to it, as though he was a kind, neighboring brother who was really concerned about the other. However, Qin Mu's mind was still clear. He was the Heavenly Devil Cult Master. Even though he frequently called himself Heavenly Saint Cult Master, there were numerous great experts that were proficient in the devil path in Heavenly Devil Cult. Great educational Heavenly Devil scriptures were extremely strange and changed along with the heart. If there was devil nature in one's heart, great educational Heavenly Devil scriptures would hold devil techniques, and if God nature was in one's heart, they would be righteous. As Heavenly Devil Cult Master, Qin Mu wasn't at the level where he could be bluffed by the devil voice. He didn't believe even one word that the devil expert had said. Those words were for Qin Mu let his guard down. All that nonsense about turning to leave and having an unknown number of opponent hidden. If he believed it, he would die. Qin Mu stood still, not moving. 8,000 swords were strewn at random in the air and floated around him. They were waiting in the battle array of sword-treading mountains and rivers to unleash its power. The devil expert suddenly moved, rushing straight at Qin Mu. The energy which exploded from the corporeal body of this young true devil was terrifying. When Qin Mu's sword-treading mountains and rivers was released, he was ready to rush through them. Qin Mu shouted out, and sword-treading mountains and rivers still managed to trap his body. The devil expert then took out a huge flag and swept it toward the sword light. A huge chunk went missing from the picture of mountains and rivers. Formation expert. Qin Mu was astonished. The huge flag was stabbed into the ground where it spread open and revealed countless devil markings. They swirled around, and an eye took shape. The devil expert fell back and jumped inside it, vanishing without a trace. The sword-treading mountains and river exploded, but it couldn't do anything to that devil flag. It was evident that the devil flag was an unusual treasure. Qin Mu was about to mobilize Carefree Sword to cut it apart when the devil expert appeared behind him. Qin Mu swung his sword there, but another huge flag appeared. The devil expert jumped into it to disappear again, causing his attack to miss. Only a huge flag was left in the ground. Soon, there were 8 flags around Qin Mu. They spread out, and the end of each flag connected to another one, forming an octagonal formation that took up the area of a sports field. In the center of each flag, there was an open devil eye. Qin Mu frowned as trails of devil chi shot out from the devil eyes, bombarding him. Vital chi around his body rose and transformed into a huge bell that was there yet not there. Around the bell's wall, countless lightning markings coiled. He was using 5th Ancestor Human Emperor's 5 Thunder Heaven-raising bell. Clang, clang, clang. Loud explosions rang out as Qin Mu struck outward from the inside of the bell, fighting with the trails of devil chi. 5 Thunder Heaven-raising bell was sometimes big and sometimes small, sometimes powerful and sometimes weak. In the meantime, the devil flags swirled continuously, and the devil chi from the devil eyes was sometimes thick and sometimes thin, sometimes strong and sometimes weak. This caused the bell to ring continuously and churn Qin Mu's chi and blood. He moved, and 5 Thunder Heaven-raising bell also moved with him. However, the devil flags outside also moved along with him. 5 Thunder Heaven-raising bell was 5th Ancestor Human Emperor's ultimate art, which mixed corporeal body divine arts with lightning divine arts. 5 lightning were the 5 big thunderclouds, and he used his strong corporeal body to execute them to form bell markings. Every punch and every kick would cause the 5 bolts of lightning to spread, and the bell would contract before expanding. The power of the 5 thunderclouds could increase by a lot, so it was the most suitable to destroy devil techniques. Yet now Qin Mu couldn't break it. He suddenly transformed into the form of Saturn's sovereign. Gate of Heaven influence appeared behind him and he spun around, sweeping it past the 8 huge flags. Soon, though, it was shattered by the beams of the devil chi. Gate of Heaven influence hadn't managed to force out the true form of the devil expert. Eyes awaken. Layers of formation markings swirled in Qin Mu's eyes, and he looked around himself. Yet no matter in which direction he turned, he couldn't find the devil expert. He could only see figures moving quickly through the flags as though they were phantoms. Within the formation, the huge bell that was struck by the devil chi didn't completely disperse it. Instead, they moved in fine lines that could be seen by the naked eye. Those lines were laid in the space and sliced it into numerous chunks. Each cubic space had runes of the devil path continuously forming inside. The devil was a formation expert. The attack earlier had been a diversion, while his true goal was to trap Qin Mu in his killing formation and purifying him. In this way, he could preserve his strength to deal with other people. He was planning to use the smallest amount of energy possible to get rid of Qin Mu. The human youth's magic power far surpassed that of his peers, and his divine arts were overbearing and fierce. There were many people that could force him to guard, but only a few strong practitioners like First Ancestor Human Emperor and Village Chief could be able to suppress him on the same realm. However, the devil expert he now faced was also one of them. First Ancestor and Village Chief were experts that had entered the path, so it was not surprising for them to be able to that. However, the devil expert was of the younger generation. From just this point, it could be seen how profound were his formation attainments. Formation skill? Qin Mu suddenly dispersed 5 Thunder Heaven raising bell and stretched his hand to grab his sword pellet with a tight grip. Fine flying swords flowed out like water and transformed into a huge spear. If anyone was to look at it in detail, they would see that it was constructed from countless fine flying swords which were moving non-stop. Every sword was executing spiral sword form, and the tip of the spear was carefree sword that was incomparably sharp. At the same time, runes appeared around Qin Mu's body. They weren't powerful divine arts markings, but symbols of algebra and mathematics, Taiji diagram, Wuji diagram, sun and moon runes, 5 elements runes, 6 directions arrays, 8 trigrams arrays, 64 hexagrams. They were changing continuously, constructing a kind of system that calculated the isometric space. The runes changed irregularly, calculating the formation structure that was formed by the 8 devil flags. Countless runes bounced around, and the calculation speed was dazzling to behold. Qin M focused his vision, and his body moved with the spear. It flew out like a dragon covered in silver light. Every beam of devil chi hit by it was shattered. Suddenly, the 8 flags swayed and were taken back. The formation of the devil expert was broken, and his true form was revealed. He swept up the flags and immediately left. He laughed and said, "It's rare to meet an expert skilled in calculations. Your abilities are very strong. Farewell." The flag covered him, and he instantly vanished. Qin Mu stabbed the huge spear in the ground, his spirit unrivaled. He didn't relax at all. After a moment, though, his aura suddenly weakened and he coughed up blood. He gasped for breath and sat down on his butt. At that moment, the devil expert appeared behind him like a phantom and stabbed his huge flag which like a spear at Qin Mu. He laughed again. "You truly have no more strength left, so I'm back again." A strange smile appeared on Qin Mu's face. He was sitting with his back toward the devil youth as the huge spear in his hand separated into 2 huge knives. Holding one of them properly and the other in reverse, he hid one behind his back to block the huge flag that came straight for his heart. The other knife was hidden in front of his chest. Qin Mu spun around and slashed with the huge knife which he'd held at the front at the huge flag. The devil expert was astonished, and the flag in his hand swayed until both of his arms went numb. "Do you know the sure kill technique of the battle technique school?" Both of them were leaning forward, and Qin Mu spoke into his opponent's ear. His feet were off the ground, but he was still sitting, as though that devil's move had turned him around like a spinner. This was a trick that Butcher had frequently played on Qin Mu when he had no legs. It was used to test his move, raising the knife from forbidden. It was the most dangerous move among Butcher's knife skills. The devil expert moved irregularly and his body shifted like a phantom, but he could never shake Qin Mu off. His speed was indeed faster, but Qin Mu stuck to his back as though their bodies were glued together. The devil expert's figure transformed continuously, and his body movements were truly strange and unpredictable. In time, he managed to shake off Qin Mu and was delighted. He could finally deal with him face to face. At this moment, Qin Mu's voice came from beside his ears. "What's your name?" "My name is..." Knife light shone, and Qin Mu raised his blade with a reverse grip. The devil expert couldn't even finish his answer before the power of this move burst forth. "Sorry, I didn't let you finish speaking." Qin Mu put away his knives. They flowed down from his hands like quicksand, changing into a sword pellet. The devil expert's belly was sliced open, and his corporeal body collapsed on the ground. Qin Mu let out a shaky breath and shook his head. "Another expert and I will be dead." He tilted his head to listen, but there was no noise in the mountains surrounding him. After a moment, he repeatedly weakly, "Another expert and I will be dead." The majestic mountains in the surroundings still had no movement. "Work!" Qin Mu opened his mouth and spat out blood before collapsing onto the ground. He twitched twice and gave a kick with his leg before taking his last breath. The surrounding mountains were still silent, without any movement at all. Qin Mu's face turned green and his body grew stiff. His blood and flesh hardened, but there was still no movement in the surroundings. After a moment, Qin Mu got up and went back to the wall of fire to forge his flying swords without a change in expression. A female devil on a mountaintop raised her head and watched the youth from above. She then suddenly turned around and left without any hesitation. "The forging brat is even more devilish than me. I can't provoke him." At that moment, Huang Yu stopped and raised his head to look at the mountaintop. There was a person carrying a long knife standing upright there. Zhe Huali. Tales of Herding Gods. Chapter 527, Divine Arts on the Battlefield. Why would Saint Woodcutter appear here? The sacrificial altar he used seemed to have been long prepared. So could it be that the people of this world were the ones who had summoned him? Qin Mu's mind was blown. The sacrificial altar had been buried right in the center of the battlefield, so when the two armies clashed, flesh and blood activated it, summoning Saint Woodcutter. It was evident that this had been long prepared. Qin Mu immediately remembered Hermit Qing Yu's saying about Saint Woodcutter reviving a month ago and leaving with his axe. Saint Woodcutter had to have received some news, which was why he woke up from his slumber to use a sacrificial ceremony to descend to this world. Qin Mu blocked the opponent's attack from behind him, and Gate of Heaven influence suddenly grew bigger. His body spun, and Gate of Heaven influence also swirled after, instantly sending many souls to Yudu before they could even grunt. Whoosh! The tiger god that was carrying Saint Woodcutter jumped off the sacrificial altar and headed straight for the enemy camp. He looked at Qin Mu with astonishment, and a world-shaking voice rumbled. "My lord, that looks like your younger generation." From the tiger's back, Saint Woodcutter looked back and saw Qin Mu fighting the heavenly devil horde with the Gate of Heaven influence. His gaze was bright, and he lighted up the whole area around the sacrificial altar. Weird. How did he come to Supreme Emperor Heaven? Saint Woodcutter looked away. Wherever the tiger god passed, devils and horses were thrown aside. When the tiger god roared, sound waves burst forth, sending countless devils into the air. When Qin Mu saw this sight, the dragon Qilin's oversized tummy flashed through his mind. He couldn't help envying Saint Woodcutter. This tiger god refers to him as his lord, so he should be his mount. He's truly majestic. On the tiger's back, Saint Woodcutter raised the axe in his hand and split apart Devil God's divine arts that were flying at him. With a few ups and downs, the tiger god carried him into the enemy camp. From the time the tiger god leaped down the sacrificial altar to when he reached the enemy camp was only a matter of a few breaths. Saint Woodcutter raised his huge axe, and with a raise and a fall of his hand, the four heads of a four-headed devil god in the camp flew off before he could even get up. Ha Tiaila! Devil gods rushed over and circled the tiger god. Saint Woodcutter, who sat on its back, raised his huge axe. Its light surged forth like a flood. Great educational, heavenly devil scriptures. No, what he executed should be the complete Overlord Body 3 elixir technique. Qin Mu was forced back continuously by the heavenly devil horde and had to move up the altar. While doing so, he'd noticed Saint Woodcutter's attack just then from the corner of his eye. His comprehension of Overlord Body 3 elixir technique far surpasses mine. Saint Woodcutter wasn't only swinging his axe. His other hand was executing all kinds of divine arts from great educational heavenly devil scriptures. However, they weren't just single arts but were combinations of different ones, just like Li Tianxing's great overarching heavenly stars palm force. After mastering hundreds of divine arts via comprehensive study, he matched them into a kind of divine art. If it were others, they wouldn't have been able to see that his divine art was even great educational heavenly devil scriptures. However, as heavenly devil cult master, Qin Mu immediately recognized it. Around Saint Woodcutter, all kinds of strange force fields burst forth and blew the devil gods away. At that instant, a huge axe suddenly went to them and cut off their heads. The strength of its battle power was extremely terrifying. Qin Mu wanted to observe Saint Woodcutter's divine arts in detail, but more and more of the heavenly devil hordes surrounded him. After Saint Woodcutter had been summoned, he went for the head of the enemy and entered the camp to kill devil gods. He ignored the rest of the heavenly devil army, so countless devils were still flooding into the battlefield and killing the enemies. At this moment, even more heavenly devil horde flooded over, but the divine arts practitioners behind the sacrificial altar were also pushing forward. The noise of the battle was world-shaking. In this kind of large-scale divine arts battle, the power of one man was insignificant. If a person got distracted, they could die under the enemy's attack at any moment. Qin Mu couldn't waste any more time and abandoned all considerations to just fight with all he had. The abilities of heavenly devil horde were strangely powerful. The techniques and divine arts of the devils and eternal peace were poles apart. The former may be lacking in intricateness of the moves, but they were outstanding in their magic power. Heavenly devil horde had its extraordinary points there. Their corporeal bodies were different from those of the human race. Their 8 divisions were as such: fish-scaled webbed frogs, magma giants, beautiful youths, ugly women, scorpion-tailed ladies, 8-clawed women, 8 tentacled mutants, and snake-handed mutants. These devils had a higher bloodline and were natural fighting machines that had extremely strong battle power. The ones around Qin Mu were the elites and not one was any weaker than him. More and more heavenly devil horde rushed up the sacrificial altar, and there were as many as 10 people. They saw that the gate of heaven influence behind Qin Mu was incomparably strange and avoided it while working together to attack. Qin Mu fought against them with all his strength, and the 8,000 swords shuttled back and forth. Countless sword lights flooded in when the flying swords scattered like locusts. In a split second, mountains and rivers appeared, forming sword-treading mountains and rivers. On the sacrificial altar, mountains stretched endlessly, waterfalls fell, and long rivers flowed. The terrifying fights earlier had vanished without a trace. Yet the next moment, blood flowed out from this picture of mountains and rivers, dyeing the mountains and rivers red. They then crumbled, and a magma giant swung a huge hammer after raising from the shattered mountains and rivers. Qin Mu retreated and raised his hands up high. Carefree Sword flew over, and the other 8,000 swords rushed over. In the blink of an eye, they all merged into Carefree Sword. The magma giant smashed down with a hammer, and terrifying air currents rushed in all directions, sweeping countless corpses around the sacrificial altars into the air. Qin Mu held his sword in both hands against that magma giant's hammer that spun as fast as the wind. Only a clink was heard when they collided, but Qin Mu trembled violently as he got sent into midair. At that moment, the magma giant was sliced into 2 along with his hammer. Before Qin Mu even landed on the ground, he saw an 8-clawed woman opening her claws wide. The corpses in midair were blasted apart, and the blood covered the surroundings, drowning the youth. Qin Mu swung Carefree Sword, and it separated. 8,000 swords combined to form 2 long knives which crossed each other. Knife lights created something akin to a moon in the sky. The moonlit knife lights merged into one and suddenly exploded. Rays of light shot down like meteors. Swoosh! The blood fog was cut, and the 8-clawed woman saw starlight. Her claws tapped it, and sounds of collision rang out. Moonlight and starlight penetrated her body, dismembering her. The sixth form of butcher's pig slaughtering knife skills. The long knife hangs below the moonlight. Among the stars the heavenly horses are startled. Qin Mu loosened his grip on the sword, and the two long knives flew up to separate into countless flying swords that circled around him to block the thousands of devil knives coming at him. Flipping his hand to strike out with a madra, the knife skill devil expert that was attacking runt before exploding into pieces. Boom, boom, boom. Thunder rumbled and exploded over 10 miles. Wherever Qin Mu's yin-yang heaven-flipping hands passed, people and horses were overturned. With another madra from his main hand, the ice froze the land for over 10 miles. An index finger tapped on the heart of brows, and the flying swords followed the path of yin-yang heaven-flipping hands to spiral forward and make blood to flow like the river. Spiral sword form. Suddenly, two huge pythons coiled around Qin Mu and twisted crazily. A snake woman had jumped into the air and bound him with her arms, which were snakes. Qin Mu raised his head, and two rays shot out from his eyes. Holes opened up in the chest of the snake woman, killing her, but the snake arms still brought him to midair as well. Below him, an ugly woman suddenly slammed the calabash behind her, and its mouth opened. With a whoosh, blood-colored devil chi spewed out and went straight for Qin Mu. True dragon overlord body. Qin Mu shouted out furiously and broke free of the snake arms. With a madra, the apparition of a volcano suddenly appeared behind him. It stood tall as it suddenly erupted. Magnetic raging inferno palm. He smacking his palm in the direction below himself, and the blood-colored devil chi was incinerated along with the ugly woman. Superb divine art. Among the divine arts practitioners of Seven Stars Realm, you can place in the top 10. Qin Mu was astonished when he heard the stiff voice. He looked down and saw a great general of heavenly devil horde running up the sacrificial altar with his head raised to look at him. That heavenly devil great general had huge flags behind his back. While rushing up, his body suddenly shook, and 4 heads, as well as 8 arms, popped out. He held long knives which crossed each other. His footsteps changed unpredictably as he killed all the divine arts practitioners on his way. Primordial spirit projection. The heavenly devil great general smacked the back of his knife against his head, and a primordial spirit that was 30 yards tall leaped out from his body. It roared toward the sky and raised its hand to blast a madra at Qin Mu. It was almost half a field wide, with markings coiling around one another within it and displaying all kinds of devil markings that were glowing bright before dimming at intervals. Devil markings danced, but before they even came to Qin Mu's sides, devil runes that looked like chains appeared around him to bind him. Yet he definitely couldn't receive the power of that palm. Carefree sword and the other flying swords were flying back, but they were too far away to save him. At that moment, Qin Mu saw that Saint Woodcutter's 5 fingers come together and all kinds of divine arts from great educational heavenly devil scriptures merge into one. Their power burst forth and blew a devil god into pieces. Inspiration struck Qin Mu, and he also put all his 5 fingers together. His overlord body 3 elixir technique instantly circulated in a strange pattern. His spirit embryo and soul merged together. The 5 elements shone brightly. The 6 directions became one. 7 stars rose into the sky, and the sun and moon rotated. Bang, bang, bang. Boundless energy flooded out from Qin Mu's body and snapped the devil-marking chains around him. He then raised his hand to welcome the fierce palm from the heavenly devil great general's primordial spirit. Qin Mu grunted and bounced up high into the sky where countless divine arts, as well as weapons of the gods and devils, were wreaking havoc. If he went any higher, he would definitely die miserably. Countless runes appeared around his body and swirled around him. Just as Qin Mu was about to fly into the forbidden area in the sky, he vanished. Bang! He fell over 10 miles away. The terrifying palm force from the heavenly devil great general's primordial spirit had made him tumble and crash into a bunch of divine arts practitioners that were rushing forward. Qin Mu tumbled dozens of times before stabilizing himself. Countless divine arts practitioners rushed past him. Soon after, They raised all kinds of spirit weapons into the air before sending them to the ground diagonally like rain, completely covering the land before themselves. It was hard to say how many devils had died from that avalanche of spirit weapons. I'm still alive? Qin Mu hurriedly checked his body and discovered that even though he was covered in injuries, the sure-kill attack from that heavenly devil great general had not injured him. He couldn't help being surprised and delighted. That move of Saint Woodcutter has unbelievable power. Could he have known I was in trouble and purposely executed this move for me to learn and survive that sure death situation? He stretched his hand out to grab emptiness. Carefree Sword brought the other flying swords back before they changed back into a sword pellet in his palm. Suddenly, a crisp voice came from behind him. I seem to have seen you before. Qin Mu turned back and saw a towering god behind him. On its shoulder was a girl with 2 braids. Her head was tilted as she examined him. Tales of Herding Gods. Chapter 528, Braid Girl and Shadow Boy. You're the long braid girl. As Qin Mu examined the girl with the 2 long braids, he couldn't help thinking about the girl he had met in the darkness. In delight, he asked, Is that really you? The girl back then had also had 2 long braids, but because they were situated in 2 different worlds, they couldn't talk or even see each other's faces. They could only take note of the other's silhouette. They had once been through a long night together and avoided the pursuit of the heavenly devil horde. But the sun had risen, and the darkness retreated. The girl had then vanished along with the dark realm. The girl standing on the shoulder of the god in front of Qin Mu also had long braids that were hanging down to her waist. When she heard the mention of a girl with long braids, and she couldn't help becoming delighted and surprised, she hurriedly jumped down from the shoulder of the god and came to Qin Mu in a few footsteps. 2 small dimples appeared on her cheeks. You're that shadow boy, father. He is that shadow boy that later disappeared. The god lowered his head and looked at Qin Mu. He asked suspiciously, If you're that shadow, why do you have a physical body now? We saw you battling earlier, and it was truly extraordinary. We were wondering where had such an expert came from. You're on 7 Stars Realm? For divine arts practitioners of 7 Stars Realm to have such achievements like yours is very rare in Supreme Emperor Heaven. You're a truly formidable youth. Qin Mu's heart trembled slightly. There are divine arts practitioners of 7 Stars Realm here that are stronger than me? Are they overlord bodies? Overlord bodies? The god picked them up to carry forward while asking with a blank face, What's overlord body? I've never heard of it before. They are all youths with the aptitude of true gods, the kings among the spirit bodies. They were born extraordinary and aren't any overlord bodies. Kings of the spirit bodies? Qin Mu blinked. He had never heard of kings among the spirit bodies, and his mind blanked out. However, excitement grew in his heart once more. Kings among the spirit bodies, youths with aptitudes of true gods. He had been right to come to this world. He had treated himself as an offering to teleport his body to this world. In the battlefield, he had already noticed the extraordinary points of the heavenly devil horde. Their abilities were extremely strong, and if any of them were put in eternal peace, they would all be people who wouldn't be inferior to Pan Gongzhou. Of course, in terms of escaping abilities, Pan Gongzhou would still be unrivaled. Supreme Emperor Heaven has been through some 20,000 years of baptism of war. The paths, skills, and divine arts here must have improved at a godly speed. Over here, I might find the way to defeat First Ancestor Human Emperor. His hands clenched into tight fists. Defeating First Ancestor Human Emperor had become his biggest goal. Since he couldn't find hope in defeating him in eternal peace, he might as well go look for it in Supreme Emperor Heaven. Even if he couldn't find it, knowing more paths, skills, and divine arts could also assist him in improving himself. Suddenly, the god rushed into the battlefield, leaving them behind. You guys remain here. Far away, a tear ripped open in space, and 6 pitch-black hands pulled out. They grabbed hold of the corners of the crack and tried to pull it open wider. The god rushed forward and pulled out his sword to cut off those hands. But just as he took care of 2, a huge hammer suddenly came and sent him away. A devil god had arrived to stop him. The long braid girl watched the battlefield with concentration for a time. She only let out a sigh of relief when she saw that her father was fine and had returned to kill the devil that had attacked him. "Hey, you guys were not here originally, so why have you appeared here?" He was slightly confused. The place in which he had met this girl was the hinterland of Great Ruins, while this place was the borders of Great Ruins that were 20 to 30,000 miles apart. By right, she shouldn't have been anywhere nearby. The long braid girl's face fell. "After you vanished, our city was invaded and many people died. Father was the one that rescued us and brought us to this brilliance injured city." She rushed forward, and Qin Mu followed after her in a hurry. "When I disappeared, it was just as the night became day. So didn't the devils in your Supreme Emperor Heaven vanish?" The long braid girl was puzzled. Why would they vanish? Qin Mu was stunned. He had thought that Supreme Emperor Heaven was like Great Ruins and also faced the invasion of darkness. When he had walked through it and the darkness retreated, he had also left Supreme Emperor Heaven. But from the looks of it now, the situation in Supreme Emperor Heaven was different from that of Great Ruins. The devils didn't vanish upon the rising of the sun, but stayed without any limits. It looks like Dutian Devil King was right. The world barrier between Supreme Emperor Heaven and the Devil's world has been compressed and broken. Qin Mu was astonished. Since his guess was completely accurate, his other guess will probably come true as well. After the devils take over Supreme Emperor Heaven, they will sacrifice it for the Devil world to collide with Eternal Peace world. But how can I stop that? The long braid girl rushed down to the altar while saying quickly, "You have fought for a while, so you should go to Brilliance Injured City to rest first. I still need to fight with the army. This bit of injury is nothing." Qin Mu quickly caught up with her and said, "I'm also an apothecary and am quite famous in my world. I've already treated myself just now. I've come here to seek stronger skills, since many in my world have been lost throughout the ages." The mountain-like sacrificial altar had already been taken by the Heavenly Devil Horde with the lead of the Heavenly Devil General that had blown Qin Mu over 10 miles away. Several hundred soldiers of the Heavenly Devil Horde were fighting with divine arts practitioners of Supreme Emperor Heaven up the altar. The latter's situation was extremely bitter. The Heavenly Devil General at the highest point of the sacrificial altar was casting divine arts. In the sky, lumps of dark lightning rolled and scattered through the ground. Everywhere they passed, the flesh of divine arts practitioners of Supreme Emperor Heaven would dissolve, turning them into running skeletons. Qin Mu narrowed his eyes. The fierceness and strangeness of the divine arts of the devil race were even higher than what the divine arts practitioners that cultivated the devil path in Heavenly Devil Cult could show. The long braid girl rushed up the altar. "My father and I had seen it when we were observing the battle in Brilliance Injured City. Even though you are very powerful, your magic power is ridiculously strong, your divine arts are incomparably exquisite, your achievements in the divine arts are extremely high, your techniques seem to have a problem. You showed no true God-level techniques, and my father said that there's a gap in your civilization." The girl faced a Heavenly Devil Horde soldier who was an Azura with extremely strong abilities and corporeal body. His attacks were incomparably fast when he suddenly trembled, revealing all kinds of rune markings as though they were carved into his skin. However, the corporeal body of the long braid girl was also ridiculously strong. The two of them fought with speed, hiding their divine arts between their palms and fingers. Like that, the outcome of the battle was decided in an instant. The long braid girl shattered the heart of her opponent by jabbing at the heart of his brows. The head of that Azura exploded, and his corpse fell to the ground, rolling down the steps of the altar. The corners of Qin Mu's eyes twitched. He saw that the divine arts of the girl weren't more exquisite than his. In truth, they were really crude, but her technique had extraordinary points. The long braid girl continued to fight her way up the altar while speaking to him. "Father said that many parts of your body are already no inferior to those of the divine arts practitioners with aptitudes of true God. For example, your hands, heart, dantian, legs, and eyes have already reached extremely high achievements. However, your hands are hands, legs are legs, heart is heart, dantian is dantian. Looking at them alone, your achievements are extremely high, but your corporeal body hasn't unified them, so you have not reached the aptitude of a true god. Compared to a young true god, you're slightly inferior. Throughout her speech, she killed several people with her fierceness. She walked step by step up to the top of the sacrificial altar. With her breaking up the disposition of troops, the other divine arts practitioners gained spirit and frantically rushed toward the top of the altar as well. Yet more heavenly devil horde flooded over to block them, holding back their momentum. Qin Mu transformed into Saturn Sovereign's form and swept gate of heaven influence forward. The heavenly devil horde soldiers which got caught instantly lost their souls and collapsed. He looked around and nodded. The long braid girl had been right. The divine arts practitioners of Supreme Emperor Heaven indeed possessed an advantage over the divine arts practitioners of Eternal Peace. Their divine arts weren't exquisite, but their power was much stronger. Their changes in moves couldn't be compared to those in Eternal Peace, but because of their strong corporeal bodies, the power of their moves was much greater. This should have been the effect of their techniques. Even people as powerful as Butcher, Mute, Cripple, Granny C, Blind, and the rest had only one thing in which they were skilled and had cultivated to God realm. They couldn't reach such heights in all fields. Even if it was a sicko like Eternal Peace Imperial Preceptor, the saint that appears once every 500 years, he too couldn't reach God realm in every field. Yet the techniques of the divine arts practitioners in Supreme Emperor Heaven were a grade higher, so all parts of their bodies had received training. They developed in all fields, and so their battle power was even greater. No wonder all of the divine arts practitioners and devils in Supreme Emperor Heaven are so strong. Qin Mu suddenly had a feeling of the dark clouds parting and the sky becoming clear. The purpose of his journey was to find the method to defeat First Ancestor Human Emperor, and now he finally saw a ray of dawn. However, your magic power is strong and your divine arts are exquisite, so even though you are lacking, you can still hold your place in a battlefield. In Supreme Emperor Heaven, there shouldn't be many people stronger than you on the same realm. The long braid girl continued to talk in a loud voice, telling Qin Mu about her father's opinion of him. Your technique is too scattered, though. When you train your eyes, you just train your eyes. When you train your hands, you just train your hands. And when you train your heart, you just train your heart. You're training all of them separately. If you unified all parts of your body and was able to cultivate your corporeal body, magic power, primordial spirit, and also divine arts together, you would have another astonishing leap in power. However, all of this happened because your technique was too scattered. If you wanted to combine everything into one now, it would probably be incomparably difficult. Qin Mu let out a shaky breath. The long braid girl was only passing on her father's opinion since she couldn't have that kind of judgment and knowledge herself, but she had indeed pointed out Qin Mu's weakness, or in fact, the entire Eternal Peace Empire's weakness. Throughout that land's history, as long as the divine arts practitioners gained achievements in one area, it would be enough for them to stand at the top of the world. However, since they didn't string all these achievements together, the technique had never become a system. This was because they were all the later generations of people who had escaped from the disaster 20,000 years, and there was a huge gap in their inheritance. They had cultivated hard and the wise had researched the divine arts, but they could never break through the shackles of technique. The two finally fought to the top of the sacrificial altar. Hundreds of divine arts practitioners fought against the heavenly devil horde that was attacking up from below while the rest surrounded heavenly devil general. A bunch of dogs and chickens. The heavenly devil general laughed loudly with his primordial spirit standing behind him overflowing with flames. His four heads surveyed the surroundings as the huge flags on his back flew up. He sneered and said, "Killing you guys is as easy as flipping over a palm." The long braid girl and the rest looked at him with grim expressions. The heavenly devil general's abilities were extremely high, and even Qin Mu didn't dare to receive his attack head-on. The four-headed devil could probably take one of their lives with a single move. Looks like the next step of Eternal Peace Empire's reform should deal with technique. Beside the braid girl, Qin Mu seemed to be in deep thought as he took out a huge jade eye from his Taotai sack. His hand made some tweak at its back. "Do you think I can construct a bridge to connect Eternal Peace to your Supreme Emperor Heaven?" Qin Mu asked. I want the divine arts practitioners of eternal peace to come here for experience and to open up their horizons. The long braid girl was extremely nervous, and cold sweat kept rolling down her forehead. She said angrily, "Why are you asking so many questions? Stop thinking about other things for now. With the enemy in front of us, if we don't kill him." Light burst forth from the jade eye, and the heavenly devil general leaped up, but he was still split apart in midair. Qin Mu closed the jade eye and took out a bunch of tools for calculation along with stacks of papers before squatting down on the ground to record some numerical symbols. Next, he took out a bunch of measuring spirit weapons, then continued to draw. He didn't even raise his head, and when he said, "I want to construct a bridge that could connect the two worlds together. However, that requires a huge amount of calculations. Do you have any experts skilled in calculations?" Tales of Hurting Gods. Chapter 529, Sun Creator of Supreme Emperor Heaven. The two halves of the heavenly devil general fell from the sky before he had even breathed his last. When he landed, he twitched a few times. He was an expert of celestial being realm and had even grown 4 heads. Qin Mu had used Moon Jade Eye to slice him into half, but with his powerful life force, he didn't die from that right away. His 4 heads stared ruthlessly at Qin Mu, but he gradually ran out of energy and died. In the surroundings, numerous divine arts practitioners of Supreme Emperor Heaven couldn't wipe away the astonishment on their faces. They stared blankly at the big boy that was calculating by himself in the bloody battlefield. The fiendish heavenly devil general had been a great expert of celestial being realm, and a famous young strong practitioner among the devil race to top that. His abilities were profound and ineffable, so if he had made his move, hundreds of people would have probably died on the altar. Yet he had been stopped. "Who is this?" A divine arts practitioner of Supreme Emperor Heaven asked in a low voice. Beside him, someone said, "He was Devil God Fu Riluo's disciple, and among the devil experts of Celestial Being Realm, he is ranked number 7. He was known as a strong practitioner that would grow into a true devil, the most favorite disciple of Furiluo." "No, I'm talking about him. I have no idea." The long braid girl pulled Qin Mu up with a smile. "You just killed Fu Yuxiao. This fellow had a very high position among the devils of Celestial Being Realm. You've done huge merit." Qin Mu took a glance at the corpse with astonishment. His position was high? No wonder then that he was so powerful. If I hadn't learned that move from Saint Woodcutter, I probably wouldn't have even been able to take a blow from him. He squatted down again and continued to calculate. The long braid girl looked at the jade eye and asked suspiciously, "How did you kill him?" "This eye. It was made by gods during High Emperor era. They constructed the formation on the moon to use its power," Qin Mu said before focusing on his calculations once more. Fu Yuxiao had 4 heads which controlled his body at the same time. This would result in a conflict of consciousness, but when he encountered something, his 4 heads didn't control his body separately. His reaction should have been muscle memory. I just needed to calculate it according to his divine arts and moves and what his muscles would do when he's in danger. After knowing that, I activated this Moon Jade Eye. When he jumped into the sky, he would collide with the ray and kill himself. The long braid girl stared at him with her eyes wide open, astonishment evident on her face. He would jump into the attack to kill himself? Calculations could be used like that? How had he calculated it? "Do you have any experts skilled in algebra here?" Qin Mu opened his Taotai sack, and the calculation spirit weapons flew back inside. He frowned and said, "To build the world bridge, a lot of calculations are needed. If it was just me doing it, I reckon I'd need half a year to calculate the equation for sacrificial spirit energy conversion and shifting. Only then would I be able to establish the space algebra model for the bridge that stretches across the two worlds." The surroundings were silent. After a moment, the long braid girl asked in an astringent voice, "What did you just say?" "Equation. Equation. Mathematical equation is used to find the variable." "Variable? You guys don't know what's variable?" "Variable is the unknown. Algebra, it's the unknown quantity." Qin Mu raised his head and looked at the expressions of the divine arts practitioners of Supreme Emperor Heaven. These people looked at him as though they were listening to a heavenly book. He couldn't help having a bad feeling and probed. You guys don't have 10 computational canons here? The most basic 9 writings of calculation? Also never learned them before? How about computational canon of supreme mystery? Have you learned computational canon of native woman? You should have learned the circulatory cycle stars array equation at least, right? This is the calculation regarding meteorological phenomenon. Everyone in the surroundings shook their heads in a daze. The long braid girl said, "What's the use of learning calculations?" The other people nodded and said with smiles, "We're always fighting on the battlefield, so where would we find the time to learn this? The fastest way to raise our abilities is to train, learn divine arts, and comprehend them." Qin Mu looked at them with anger. You guys don't calculate meteorological phenomenon? You guys should have calculated the trajectory of the stars in the sky at least, right? Everyone's expression grew weird, and Qin Mu was bewildered by it. Suddenly, a divine arts practitioner said, "There are no stars in the sky, so what do we calculate?" Qin Mu was stunned and raised his head to look at the sky. The sky of Supreme Emperor Heaven was pitch black, without any stars, just 2 halves of a sun. Qin Mu saw some large-scale constructions on the broken surfaces, but they weren't complete. The half-suns were actually forged. They weren't naturally formed. The thing that made him not know whether to laugh or cry was that the halves weren't even round. When he had come here the last time, he didn't see any sun since it had been nighttime. Only this time did he see that the sun of Supreme Emperor Heaven was made up of 2 separate halves, and neither of them was even circular. One was a little cubic, the other a little oval, and both distorted in some areas. Qin Mu wanted for nothing more than to fly to the sky and destroy the 2 suns. Even if Eternal Peace's astronomical phenomenon were fake, they were all formations, and the gods and devils that had constructed them to trick the people were extremely serious. No matter if it was the sun or the moon, they were all round and without any flaws. Even the stars, constellations, and galaxies in the sky were made quite vividly, hiding their fake nature from Tao sect's Taoists for 20,000 years. As a result, Tao Master Lin Xian's Tao heart had collapsed the moment he realized this secret. But it was even worse for Supreme Emperor Heaven, since their half-suns had been made extremely sloppily. With a blank mind, Qin Mu shook his head. The impact that this sight brought him was even stronger than the first sighting of sunship. Of course, it had been a shock brought by the superlative craftsmanship, while this one was the shock brought by the sloppiness of the craft. Not even 1 star. You guys indeed don't need circulatory cycle stars array equation. Qin Mu nodded repeatedly, and the dragon Qilin came to his mind. The divine arts practitioners of this world don't have high attainments in algebra. I had only brought Fatty Dragon along. Things would be much easier for me. The divine arts practitioners of this world were fighting daily because of the invasion of the devil race. If they wanted to live, they had to continuously improve their abilities. The best way to do so was to train their divine arts, strengthen their bodies, and forget better spirit weapons. Algebra to them wasn't very important, and it was even something extremely dry and dull. It didn't improve their abilities at all, so throughout the generations, their attainments in algebra grew worse and worse. More and more divine arts practitioners of Supreme Emperor Heaven came to the sacrificial altar and looked down from above. They all took out longbows and pulled the bowstrings to shoot downward. Arrow lights pierced through the battlefield and killed many devils. There were some divine arts practitioners that were raising sword pellets and knife pellets to attack the enemies from afar as well. Qin Mu suddenly thought of something and asked in a hurry, "How did you guys forge this sacrificial altar?" The long braid girl was also skilled in archery and pulled her bow to shoot enemies. "The sacrificial altar has existed for a long time. I heard from my dad that it was left in Supreme Emperor Heaven for the day we could no longer last. At that time, we could summon a god-sacred teacher who would come forward to help us. Now, Supreme Emperor Heaven is on the verge of falling, so the gods of Brilliance Injured City placed the altar in the center of the battlefield. With the deaths of everyone fighting, they sacrificed enough blood and flesh." Her face fell. Many people who were sacrificed were divine arts practitioners of Supreme Emperor Heaven. A sacrificial altar left behind from 20,000 years ago. Qin Mu looked at Saint Woodcutter, who was fighting far away. Over there, the battle was even more intense. Saint Woodcutter was bringing down the enemy's camp. The sacrificial altar should have been left behind by Saint Woodcutter for Supreme Emperor Heaven to summon him when won't be able to withstand the attacks any longer. In that case, his goal should be to drag the time for eternal peace. Qin Mu set up his Moonjade Eye and adjusted the direction. Light rays shot out and killed experts of the devil race. The range of Moonjade Eye was even greater than that of the bows, and its power was superior as well. He killed the strong practitioners of the devil race with ease, and Qin Mu targeted mostly the generals. Once they died, the devils lost their leaders, and with no command, it became hard for them to form any steady push forward. Even so, more and more heavenly devils were flooding toward the sacrificial altar. People had no time to just shoot the devils far away and were forced to hit whatever was beneath them. Under the sacrificial altar, corpses piled up into mountains, but the black swarm of devils still continued to come for them. They were about to reach the top of the sacrificial altar. Qin Mu put away his Moonjade Eye and grabbed his sword pellet to guard the sacrificial altar. The two parties fought fiercely on the top of the altar. The heavenly devil horde was abnormally brave. Its soldiers weren't afraid of death, and if it wasn't for the extraordinary abilities of Supreme Emperor Heaven's divine arts practitioners, it would have been difficult to block their attacks. Beside Qin Mu and the long braid girl, divine arts practitioners started to fall one by one. Even Qin Mu and the long braid girl's situation was bad. They had nearly died a few times under the attacks of the enemy. Less and less of their own remained on the sacrificial altar, and soon only 20-30 were left. Suddenly, a world-shaking shout came from afar, and the devils flooding toward the altar listened to the news. They then quickly fell back. It was like a burden had been lifted off the shoulders of everyone on the sacrificial altar. They took in deep breaths and collapsed onto the floor. All of them were covered in blood. Behind them, a resounding call of the bugle horns and drums rang out. An army of tens of thousands rushed out of Brilliant's injured city to chase after the escaping devil army. The long braid girl struggled to get up, wanting to chase after the deserters of the devil army, but her legs wobbled, and she could only sit down once again. Qin Mu looked at the army of Brilliant's injured city that was rushing into the distance. As he did so, he suddenly recalled something. We've been through life and death twice together, yet I still don't know your name. My name is Qin Mu. What's yours? The long braid girl lay in a pool of blood while looking at one misshapen half of a sun. She calmed her breath and said, My name is Xianxia. That day, I said many things to you, but you couldn't hear anything. I was lucky to have you beside me, and it was only because of it that I was able to endure through the fight. Otherwise, I wouldn't have been able to last that long. Guess. She turned around with two small dimples in her cheeks. Guess, what did I say to you? Qin Mu shook his head. There were two worlds between us. I couldn't hear anything at all. Xianxia looked at the sky. Look, the sun is really big. Our Supreme Emperor Heaven had no sun, but these two were constructed by us with the help of a god. We called him Sun Creator, but before he completed them, Sun Creator God was killed by the devil gods. These suns are very magnificent, right? And magnificent? Qin Mu acknowledged against his will before curiosity got the better of him. So what did you say to me that night? Tales of Hurting Gods. Chapter 530, Jade-like Beauty, Rainbow-like Sword. Xianxia sat up and turned her back to Qin Mu. She unbuttoned her shirt to see the wounds under her snow-white neck. She took out a jade bottle and squeezed out the clotted blood in her wounds before applying the medicine on herself. I told you so many things that night that I don't remember them anymore. Her ears turned slightly red. Actually, that night when she had felt that she couldn't escape anymore, she told Qin Mu a lot of silly things, and some of those words could make even boys blush. However, she had said them daringly because Qin Mu wouldn't be able to hear them anyway. Unexpectedly, she lived through the night, and when she thought she would never see Qin Mu again, the nonsense she'd spoken that night became a different kind of emotion in her memory. Never had she even considered that she would be able to see the boy in the darkness to whom she had shared everything on her mind. Qin Mu raised his head to see the sun and barely resisted the urge to fly up the sky to grind the suns into dust. He then went around the girl and stretched out his hand to help her apply the medicine. Xianxia hurriedly covered herself up. Men and women should not touch. I'm an apothecary, and I only want to help you apply the medicine. I treat patients like their parents would and don't have any impure thoughts. Only when Xianxia remembered him saying that he was a somewhat famous apothecary that her heart eased. She looked curiously at how he applied the medicine on her, noticing that his hand techniques were indeed well trained. She asked suspiciously, "Your algebra attainments are very high, so why are you also skilled in the art of healing?" Qin Mu observed the wound on her chest in detail. "I've learned the art of healing for over 10 years, while I've only studied algebra for 3 years. When you put it like that, I'm much better at healing." "How long are you going to look?" Xianxia said angrily and raised her hands to cover herself up. Qin Mu hurriedly stopped her and carefully pushed her clothes down to her shoulder. He said, "I treat my patients as their parents would. And your skin is very white and your shoulders are very smooth. Stop." He frowned slightly. Xianxia's wound was left behind by a devil expert, and there was a divine art and devil qi within it, corroding her flesh and vital qi. It was hard to stop the bleeding for this kind of wound, and it was difficult to get rid of the devil qi too. The ointment that was applied to the wound had already been pushed black. It was evident that the medicinal energy had also been tainted by the devil qi. Qin Mu squeezed out the ointment that had turned black and took a sniff. He shook his head. This kind of ointment wasn't effective. "Ow! This ointment is for pulling out the poison. After application, it collects some devil qi and has to be changed." Xianxia cried out in pain and took out a few bottles of ointment. "For this kind of wound, I will have to apply it over a dozen times to completely pull the poison out. Your eyes keep sneaking glances, so let me do it." Qin Mu took out some medicinal ingredients from his taotai sack and used his method of refining pills to refine some medicine. Devil poison isn't poison. The problem is in the vital qi attributes of your God Path technique that you cultivated clashing with the Devil Path technique. The ointment you're using isn't an ointment for pulling poison, but a variant of spirit pills which weren't refined to their best state, so they're in an ointment form. This kind of ointment just gets tainted by the devil qi, so it's a waste to use it to pull out the devil qi. While he was speaking, a pill furnace formed by vital qi appeared on his palm, and he just refined his pills within it. He reversed fire and water, mixed them, and used many other kinds of pill refinement methods which dazzled Xianxia's eyes. After a moment, Qin Mu dispersed his vital qi, and over a dozen pills landed in his palm. He crushed one and smeared it on Xianxia's wound. "In my world, I'm Heavenly Saint Cult Master, who is called Heavenly Devil Cult Master by the people. I have an understanding regarding the devil path. Devil is born in the heart. Whether one is a god or a devil, it's all in the heart. Anyway, I have experience in treating wounds made by divine arts of the devil path." Soon, Xianxia felt her wound begin to feel cool, and the devil qi was all pulled out. Her wound started to itch, which was the symptom of the wound starting to heal. "My wound is healing so fast? Didn't you just say that you were only a little famous in that world of yours?" Xianxia stared with her eyes wide open before secretly bringing her braids to cover her chest. She asked curiously, "A little famous apothecary can refine spirit medicine to counter the devil qi so quickly?" Qin Mu handed the rest of the spirit pills to her and grinned. "I was being humble. Actually, I'm not a little famous but very famous in that world. But you didn't understand it from my words, did you?" He couldn't help feeling pleased. "Most people can't hear it." Xianxia was bewildered. "You aren't going to help me apply the medicine?" Qin Mu walked toward other people to treat their injuries. "I was only examining the wound back there. You can apply the medicine yourself. Other people need to be saved too." Xianxia pulled up her shirt and looked at him, who was hurrying here and there. She thought to herself, "He indeed treats his patients like their parents would and doesn't have any impure thoughts. This person is a rare gentleman, just that he likes to glance around." Qin Mu treated the injured divine arts practitioners on the sacrificial altar before looking down at the countless people and heavenly devil horde soldiers lying on the battlefield. There were people moving the injured, and there were others finishing off the devils that were still alive. The vast battlefield was full of flames left behind by divine arts. They had ignited chariots, collapsed bodies, flags, and spirit weapons standing diagonally in the ground. Far into the distance, the killing was still continuing. The world Qin Mu had entered was strangely cruel. Even though he'd passed by many battlefields before, the sight in front of his eyes was still shocking to his heart. The art of healing can't save this world? Qin Mu shook his head. His healing could only save a few people. If he wanted to get to all the injured in this battlefield, he would need months. There was one small battle every 3 days and one big battle every 5 days. He didn't have the ability to heal everyone at such a rate. He raised his head to look at the sky. The irregular suns in the sky dimmed and became red. The 2 suns were fixed and never moved. It was probably also set that at a certain hour they would just start to dim. The god that created these 2 suns had good ideas, but his attainments in algebra weren't high. Qin Mu looked away, feeling that the suns were burning his eyes. Too ugly. If I continue to look at them, I won't be able to resist going to repair them. He moved slowly around the sacrificial altar while mobilizing his vital qi to execute Overlord Body 3 elixir technique. His spirit embryo and soul merged to form primordial spirit, combining his spirit and body into one. His primordial spirit stepped on the spirit platform and united the 6 directions. With sun and moon above his head, his vital qi moved, flowing through all parts of his body. His hair fluttered gently. In the fight, he had seen what made the divine arts practitioners of this world so powerful. Experiencing life and death of the battlefield had subconsciously changed his mentality for the better. Since the battle with first ancestor human emperor, he had been depressed. When fighting, he couldn't even execute his moves and was scolded fiercely by Butcher. It wasn't because he didn't dare to make a move. He just felt that no matter what move or what divine art he executed, they were all wrong. The reason why they were wrong wasn't because his confidence had suffered a setback from facing first ancestor human emperor. The problem lay in the fact that the clash had raised his horizons to a height he had never imagined before. When standing there and looking down on all the moves and divine arts he had learned before, he saw flaws everywhere. His horizons were high, but his foundation wasn't enough for him to change and enter the next realm, so he could not execute any moves or divine arts. He felt that they would be broken anyway and he would die in the next instant. He had treated his opponents as first ancestor human emperor, which was why he had this kind of feeling. Yet on the battlefield, Qin Mu didn't have the time to think about all that. The situation there changed every instant, so he couldn't care if there were any flaws in his moves. He could only execute them and kill all the powerful enemies or die. After the battle, Qin Mu felt that he had stepped to the threshold of a huge transformation. As long as he crossed that gate, he would definitely see a piece of blue sky, a vast road ahead of him. His body began to shine with splendid sunlight as his vital qi moved within him, connecting the spirit embryo, 5 elements, and 6 directions. The sun, moon, and stars gave off light that lit up the divine treasures, turning him into something like a person of light. Even the celestial being divine treasure in his body shone until the door to it could be seen. Meanwhile, below 6 directions divine treasure, a deep and dark door was also faintly discernible. It was the door of life and death realm which connected to Yudu. Qin Mu walked at a steady speed. In Little Jade Capital, he had observed the divine treasures of Little Jade Capital's god Qin Chongming for quite a long time. From then on, he had begun to improve his divine treasures and patch up whatever he was lacking. Roar! The vital qi in his body shook and gave off waves of dragon roars. Dragon qi coiled around his body, worming in and out to temper it. Suddenly, with his hands as knives, Qin Mu attacked while walking around the border of the sacrificial altar. The wind grew louder, and knives fell like rain. Midnight battle across stormy cities. The sun rose and jumped out of the surface of the sea. Sun on East Sea 1,000-layer waves. A golden knife adorned with white jade pierced the night with its light through the window. Man of 50 years, yet nothing made carrying knife in 8 wilderness all alone. After a crisis comes hope, and the whole journey becomes nothing but smoke. In the vast and bloody battlefield, Butcher's knife skills suddenly became very moving and alive, reflecting the calamity of the world. Qin Mu's knife skills became faster and faster. Suddenly, the knife lights vanished. The wind, the rain, the sun, the sea, they all vanished as well. Qin Mu put his fingers together into a sword, and his vital qi vibrated to form a sword thread. He gently flicked and smeared it, his sword skills incomparably exquisite. Suddenly, they became faster and faster. In the blink of an eye, his long sword swept through the air and danced above the sky of the sacrificial altar like a silver flood dragon. Qin Mu walked around the sacrificial altar while the sword light sweeping through the air, becoming faster and faster, more and more urgent. The calamity of Supreme Emperor Heaven had allowed him to gain something, and this subconsciously made him release all of his emotions. He learned through his sword skills, through his vital qi. Third form of sword picture, Calamity of High Emperor. Yet when the calamity was at its fiercest point, Qin Mu suddenly dispersed all sword light and his sword finger suddenly tapped at the heart of his brows. It not only touched the physical place on his body, but also the heart of his spirit embryo's brows. All his spirit sword qi had been gathered in his finger. He had comprehended what calamity meant. Calamity was a disaster in which people struggled for their lives. It was finding hope in hell, a hero like Butcher using his knives to carve it for people, a human emperor like village chief undertaking hardship and toiling for everyone throughout his life, and also the struggle of people behind the back of a hero. It was the life of burying the dead every day. Qin Mu's 2 fingers stabbed forward, and a rainbow-like sword stretched across 10 miles. In the sky, one of the half-suns had dimmed, and only the sword light could be seen. While it shone in the sky, Qin Mu stood on the sacrificial altar in a daze. That move had had nothing to do with village chief's sword picture. Suddenly, the youth felt that he had his own path.